Bing Tung. The bald leader was a bit surprised as well. Bing Tung. The bald leader was a bit surprised as well. Bing Tung was an extremely strong cultivator of the ice and snow mountain village. His name was famous in the entire region. He had broken through to the third Xianqi layer and was about as strong as the patriarch of the ice and snow mountain village, Han Shuetian. This time he had personally come because of Bing Yuan. Bing Yuan was his direct disciple. He had spent a lot of time making him strong and then someone had killed him. How could Bing Tung not be furious? Great Master Bing, I assumed that we had the same social status. It's not so good to be that aggressive, said the bald leader while narrowing his eyes. Bing Tung had immediately told him to piss off, making the bald leader lose face. It's not so good? Who gave you the damn permission to talk to me? Said Bing Tung, whose voice was filled with coldness and eyes with disdain. The people of the Condor Castle organization are a bunch of dogs and chickens in Bing Tung's opinion, nothing more. They were rude and filthy to look at. Even though they had a little bit of influence in Celestial River, Bing Tung despised them. What about me? Said a voice which sounded evil. Bing Tung's pupils shrank. At that moment, an extremely evil energy invaded the atmosphere. People started feeling shivers run down their spines. In the air, a silhouette was descending from the sky. It was moving extremely quickly. A brutal and evil fist bombarded the atmosphere and was moving straight towards Bing Tung. It was filled with a dense evil qi. Get lost! Furiously shouted Bing Tung. It was snowing, and the snowflakes transformed into ice filled with a deadly qi which rushed towards the fist. Boom! The atmosphere was shaking. The snow was elegantly and gracefully falling down from the sky, fluttering in the wind. How cold! The crowd, who were in the distance, all started shaking when the coldness penetrated into their bodies. That coldness also contained a monstrously dense evil qi. The crowd saw Bing Tung's body being projected backwards. On the ground, a long and deep mark followed his trajectory. He was blankly staring at the person in front of him. That person had long messy hair fluttering in the wind. From head to foot, that person looked like an evil spirit. It was surrounded by evil qi. However, when Bing Tung saw that person, he had a strange and familiar sensation. Leader! The members of the Condor Castle organization were all kneeling down. Their eyes were filled with fear. He's the great leader of the Condor Castle organization. As expected, he's very mysterious. When the crowd saw that person, they narrowed their eyes as if they wanted to see more clearly. Bing Tung was still fixedly staring at him. What, you don't recognize an old friend anymore? Said the great leader, sounding evil, which made Bing Tung shiver. His pupils shrank and he said, sounding surprised, It's you. Indeed it's me. Bing Tung, you just couldn't believe it, right? Indeed, I am too surprised. You came to Celestial River and became the great leader of the Condor Castle organization, said Bing Tung, surprised. He recognized that person. In the past they had already fought. Bing Tung used to be slightly stronger than his interlocutor, but at that moment, they were already of the same level. But the great leader's attack had been enough to project him backwards. That's life. When my son died, I dedicated my entire life to becoming stronger and became who I am today, said the great leader, sounding evil and mysterious. Bing Tung, this time we're meeting again, but we have one common goal. Let's take care of it first. All right, said Bing Tung while nodding. That interlocutor had the right to talk to him. They turned around and looked at the Celestial Mountain restaurant. Bunch of crap. Get into the restaurant and tell me what's going on, said the great leader of the Condor Castle organization. His voice was piercingly cold. Immediately after, the members of the Condor Castle organization stood up. The crowd was sighing in amazement. The great leader of the Condor Castle organization was extremely imposing, domineering and aggressive, which was why his people feared him so much. No need. At that moment, a cold and detached voice spread in the air. A silhouette appeared at the entrance of the restaurant. That person was slowly coming out. On that person's side, there was a pure and holy silhouette. She looked like a shadow. The great leader, Bing Tung, as well as Lin Feng and his two other friends, all glanced at each other. They all recognized each other. What a surprise, that's Lin Feng of the Yunhai sect, said Bing Tung at that moment. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. He thought, that boy, he's a monster. He must die today. When the Yunhai sect had been destroyed, Bing Hetung had also participated in the massacre. On that day, he had seen how frivolous Lin Feng was, notably on the stage of the life and death arena. At that moment, less than a year later, that frivolous young man had already become so strong that he had been able to kill the best core disciple of the Ice and Snow Mountain village. If he gave more time to Lin Feng, he feared that he wouldn't be able to keep him under control and he would be a great threat. At that moment he had to kill Lin Feng, not only to get his revenge but also to avoid further threats. On Bing Hitung's side, the great leader's face was filled with even more obvious killing intent. He was evilly staring at Lin Feng. "It's you. It's me," replied Lin Feng. Lin Feng surprisingly knew the great leader of the Condor Castle organization back in the past. He was also at the Yunhai sect. He had an extremely high status within the sect. "Emotsong Lan, you look even less human each time I see you, truly monstrous. You look half dead as if brought back from the brink of death." The great leader surprisingly was a traitor of the Yunhai sect. It was the one in charge of enforcing the rule of the Yunhai sect, the great elder Emotsong Lan. He had tried to help his son Wuxia kill Lin Feng a few times. On the day when the Yunhai sect was destroyed, Emotsong Lan had cut off Nan Gongling's fingers. Half dead, Emotsong Lan smiled as if it was a joke and said, "It looks like it, but this is only a human body. Besides, what is the point in looking good? Strength is the most important thing. For example, you are so young, but today you will die because I have the strength to kill you. And that girl on your side too, what a pity, such a beautiful body, and she will have to die with you." Lin Feng's facial expression became ice cold when he saw Emotsong Lan's evil expression. That guy had probably been learning evil skills to look the way he did at that moment. His body looked like it was decomposing even though he was alive. He looked like a horrible and evil monster. The crowd was thinking the same way though. Indeed, in the continent only strength mattered. For example, Lin Feng's life at that moment was in danger and it did not matter if he was handsome. It would be difficult for him to escape against strength. That bastard, thought Lan Jiao. This was a dead end for Lin Feng. He wouldn't be able to escape. He let himself fall into this trap. The vice leader of the Condor Castle organization, Emotsong Lan and Bing Hetung had all broken through to the Xianqi lair. Lin Feng couldn't escape. "Lin Feng, how do you want to die?" said Emotsong Lan while evilly staring at Li Feng. Back in the past, his son Wuxia had been killed by Protector Kong because of Lin Feng. At that moment he finally had an opportunity to avenge his dead son and kill Lin Feng. When Meng Qing heard that Emotsong Lan wanted to kill Lin Feng, she took a big step forwards and immediately released some ice energy which froze the ground. Her ice energy was extremely sharp and covered the earth and even froze the air. The ice chi which Meng Qing was releasing wasn't weaker than that of Bing Hitung's at all. Her ice chi was piercing to the bones. That is the strength of the second Xianqi layer. Emotsong Lan and Bing Hitung were stupefied. That girl had the strength of the second Xianqi layer. Besides, her ice chi was stronger, colder and more violent than ordinary ice chi. No wonder that she had managed to kill the other vice leader. "Not bad, but unfortunately, even if you manage to block one of us, will the result not be the same death?" said Emotsong Lan evilly. "I, old as I am, haven't exercised in a while. I'd be happy to join the fun." At that moment a silhouette appeared. It was an old man. He was coming towards them. "Mr. Hua." Lin Feng was stupefied. It was Mr. Hua who had been so friendly to Lin Feng, but it seemed like he had come one day too early. "Hello," said Mr. Hua while slightly nodding at Lin Feng. He walked towards Lin Feng while releasing an insanely scorching hot fire chi. The exact opposite of Meng Qing's ice. Third Xianqi layer. The crowd was astonished. Surprisingly, there was another extremely strong cultivator who wanted to help Lin Feng. "Mr. Hua, thank you," said Lin Feng to the old man who was by his side. Mr. Hua smiled and said, "You still have some things to exchange with me. How could I let those things end up in their hands?" Lin Feng slightly nodded and said, "Mr. Hua, after we solve that problem, I will express my gratitude to you properly. You are still a young man, so full of confidence," said Mr. Hua while smiling and shaking his head. They had 3 cultivators of the Xianqi layer in front of them. The old man wasn't scared for himself, he wouldn't die. He was strong enough to escape, but he wanted to protect Lin Feng. The spirit blood pills were really amazing. Another one who has come to die, said Bing Hetung coldly. He looked at Lin Feng and said, "You are really naive. Do you think that these two can protect you? We have one more cultivator of the Xianqi layer. How will you block him?" "Xianqi layer?" said Lin Feng and glanced at the bald vice leader of the Condor Castle organization. He then immediately asked Meng Qing, "Will you be alright?" "I can prevent him from approaching," said Meng Qing while staring at Bing Hetung. "Alright," said Lin Feng while nodding. "Mr. Hua, can you take care of that hideous monster? Sorry for putting you in trouble. I haven't exercised for a long time, but that hideous creature shouldn't be a problem," replied the old man. "The problem is that there is another person. How do you intend to deal with him?" "There's another one? Well, I'm in need of a warm-up. I will help myself," said Lin Feng indifferently. At that moment, a sharp light appeared and invaded the atmosphere. "I'll help myself. I'll help myself." Lin Feng's loud and imposing voice resonated in the atmosphere. People's expression became rigid when they heard him. Help himself? Lin Feng, relying on his strength of the Ling Qi layer, intended to fight against a cultivator of the Xian Qi layer? Was that even possible? However, at that moment Lin Feng's eyes looked sharp. He looked extremely frivolous and it didn't seem like he was joking. He would have never joked about such things anyway. Meng Qing and Mr. Hua wanted to fight against Bing Hetung and Mo Tsonglan. The bald leader was left and someone had to fight against him. Lin Feng had no choice but to fight against him. No matter if he wanted to fight or not, he had to. "He's going to fight against someone of the Xianqi layer," whispered the crowd. They looked impatient. They were wondering who would win, Lin Feng or the cultivator of the Xianqi layer. But they of course thought that the bald leader would win. They just thought that Lin Feng had no choice but to fight, that he was forcing himself to be brave, that's all. Lin Feng was a genius and had high natural talent, but how could he compete with the cultivator of the Xianqi layer? Lin Feng had absolutely no chance of victory. However, the two other battles were going to be worth watching. When the bald leader heard Lin Feng's words, a cold and evil expression appeared in his eyes. Lin Feng was going to help himself. Lin Feng was humiliating him. A cultivator of the Ling Qi layer surprisingly dared to fight against him. "How long will you need to kill him?" said Mo Tsonglan coldly while looking at the bald leader. In Mo Tsonglan's opinion, Lin Feng would never be able to defeat the bald leader. Lin Feng just wanted to rush to his own death, that's all. A light flashed in the bald leader's eyes and he immediately said, "If nobody else interrupts, I will definitely kill him within 10 moves. By saying 10 moves, he was taking precautions in case anything went wrong, but he would normally need much less. How could he not win against a cultivator of the Ling Qi layer? "Alright, let's see if you kill him in 10 moves, humph." Mo Tsonglan coldly groaned, which made the bald leader's heartbeat accelerate. His face was filled with murderous intentions. He had to kill Lin Feng in 10 moves, otherwise, Mo Tsonglan would be furious and it would be bad for him. Mo Tsonglan was really frightening. A year before, Mo Tsonglan had conquered the Condor Castle organization by himself. He would never forget that terrifying event. An insanely brutal and sharp qi filled the atmosphere while emitting whistling sounds. Behind the bald leader's body appeared an illusionary spirit. The illusion was a beast, more precisely an eagle. Its two piercingly cold eyes were staring at Lin Feng. "Within 10 moves, I will definitely kill him," said the bald leader coldly. In order to ensure his victory, he immediately released his spirit. He was definitely going to kill Lin Feng. Mo Tsonglan laughed and took a step forwards and released an incredible qi which immediately enveloped Mr. Hua's body. Mr. Hua was fixedly staring at him, unable to react. At the same time, Bing Hetung also released some ice qi. Ice and frost appeared in the atmosphere and covered a huge area. The ambient temperature immediately fell. It was incredibly cold. These two people were blocking Meng Qing and Mr. Hua. The crowd would be able to witness Lin Feng's death. Within 10 moves, Lin Feng would die. 10 moves, said Lin Feng, whose eyes didn't look sharp anymore. Instead, he looked calm. He was in fusion with the earth. Nothing could affect his state of mind. Every single thing that was surrounding him was perfectly clear and distinct in his mind. Everything belonged to his world and he was in fusion with everything around him. Boom! The bald leader stamped onto the ground and a crack appeared in the ground. He jumped up in the air and raised a monstrous blade. The sound of an eagle spread through the air and Bald Leader's body suddenly started to swoop down. His silhouette turned into a bright light rushed towards Lin Feng. While the he soared through the sky, he had almost reached Lin Feng, but Lin Feng wasn't reacting. How sinister, what a devious trick! The crowd was astonished. The Bald Leader's previous move had led everybody to think that he was going to focus on the power of his attack to win, but instead he adjusted his body and swooped down with incredible speed. He hadn't waited for his power to reach its maximum. Instead, he was swooping from the sky, not giving Lin Feng the time to react. That way he would be able to kill Lin Feng in one hit. However, to Lin Feng, who was in fusion with the earth, that seemed like a joke. If it had indeed been extremely quick, then it might have worked, but his speed wouldn't be close to enough. In Lin Feng's mind, the Bald Leader's actions were almost in slow motion and he saw every movement clearly. The Bald Leader's body released a soft light as it soared on the wind. A huge rumbling sound spread in the atmosphere. The broadsword in the Bald Leader's hand shot down from the sky at a terrifying speed and slammed into the ground, creating a huge crevice beneath it. However, Lin Feng was no longer there and had already moved away, looking at the scene indifferently. "One move," said Lin Feng indifferently. The crowd was stupefied. Lin Feng was counting the moves. The Bald Leader was stupefied. He raised his head and coldly looked at Lin Feng. Lin Feng had reacted very quickly, he was very fast. The Bald Leader jumped through the air like an eagle. His broadsword moved straight towards Lin Feng. The light emitted by the blade was swift and filled with pure qi. 2 moves. 3 moves. 4 moves. 5 moves. Lin Feng's silhouette was unceasingly flickering. The light of the broadsword kept passing by him but never reached his body. Each time Lin Feng dodged the attack by a hair. The most shocking part was that Lin Feng was counting and dodging at the same time. A huge rumbling noise filled the atmosphere. The broadsword violently and heavily smashed into the ground. Lin Feng had dodged an attack again, looking light and relaxed. That was the 6th move. What a terrifying dodging ability! A moment ago, the 5 first moves had been monstrously fierce and powerful, but Lin Feng had dodged them easily, surprisingly. He hadn't been touched once. His agility techniques were monstrously powerful. 6 moves. The crowd was astonished. Even though Lin Feng had dodged after the 6th attack, the Bald Leader still hadn't managed to touch Lin Feng. Only 4 moves were remaining. The Bald Leader was dumbstruck. He was blankly staring at Lin Feng. He didn't care about his broadsword anymore. A golden color appeared around his body. It was filled with pure qi which was being released from his body. At that moment he was realizing that Lin Feng was too quick. He knew that Lin Feng's power was terrifying. It seemed like Lin Feng was controlling everything. He could dodge the attacks as he wished, it seemed so mysterious. Even though the Bald Leader's attacks were all strong, they weren't able to reach Lin Feng at all. Iya! In the air a sharp and high-pitched eagle cry emerged. It was piercingly sharp in everyone's ears. The Bald Leader was attacking again. He had transformed into a golden light that was dazzling to the eyes. His body looked like it was inside a golden eagle. At that moment, the Bald Leader had transformed into an eagle. Lin Feng raised his head. His silhouette flickered and, looking elegant and graceful, he moved away. However, that eagle illusion was closely following him at incredible speed. It was leaving a trail of light behind it as if there was gold filling the sky. It was extremely beautiful. Lin Feng slightly frowned and his silhouette kept flickering. However, at that moment, it seemed like the bald man's spirit had merged with his body. His soul was probably extremely strong. He was closely following Lin Feng, determined to kill him in under 10 moves. An incredible quantity of sword qi emerged in the air. It was so sharp. That sword energy seemed like it had appeared out of nowhere. Visang! Lin Feng's hand was piercing through the atmosphere. There was no sword in his hand, but the crowd could see that it was as if his hand had become a sword. It would really be able to pierce through people. That qi was clearly not as powerful as the eagle. Boom! The golden eagle and the hand collided. The sword energy was destroyed and Lin Feng's body was projected back a few dozen meters. A cultivator of the Ling Qi layer, fighting against a cultivator of the Xian Qi layer, inevitably encountered a difference in strength. 7 moves, said Lin Feng. He raised his head. He still looked calm. 3 moves left. Let's see if you can block them. At that moment, the bald leader's facial expression was extremely evil. He had broken through to the Xianqi layer. He should easily be able to defeat Lin Feng, who was only of the Lingqi layer. I will definitely block them, said Lin Feng coldly. An incredible battle energy started burning around his body. Apart from the battle energy, he also released some sword qi and deadly qi. At the same time, behind Lin Feng emerged a purple lake which was bubbling and foaming. The bald leader was furious. Lin Feng had become angry. On that day, new people had unceasingly been coming to kill Lin Feng. Everybody was coming to kill him and looking down on him as if he had no choice but to die. How could Lin Feng not be furious? Would the 10 moves be enough to kill him? He wants to fight. Lin Feng wants to fight. He wants to fight. Lin Feng wants to fight. When the crowd sensed Lin Feng's deadly qi and battle energy, they couldn't help but shiver. What an insane young man. Even though he had only broken through to the Lingqi layer, and thus his level largely differed from that of his opponent, his determination and willpower were unwavering. He followed his beliefs without hesitation. The bald leader had asked Lin Feng how he intended to block the last 3 attacks, but why did he not consider that Lin Feng also had the ability to attack? The bald leader was stupefied as well. Lin Feng wanted to attack him. He had decided to stop dodging and fight. The eagle's silhouette was emitting a dazzling golden light. It was unceasingly absorbing more pure qi. Lin Feng was courting death. At that moment, Lin Feng raised his head and looked at the sky. He stretched his arm out and shouted coldly, "Sword!" When he finished speaking, a sword appeared in Lin Feng's hand. It was made from pure qi and contained some deadly qi as well. It looked like the sword of a war god. At that moment, Lin Feng's body was like an extremely sharp sword. His body was releasing incredible amounts of sword qi and battle energy. The battle energy and sword qi is much stronger than a moment ago when he killed the other leader of the Condor Castle organization. The crowd was astonished. At that moment, Lin Feng was releasing an incredibly strong sword qi and battle energy. It seemed like he was planning to kill. "That's only a simple sword made of pure qi, nothing more," said the bald leader while smiling coldly. Around his body, the flowing pure qi was emitting a dazzling golden light. He raised his head and cried just like an eagle, which made the crowd grow excited. Once a cultivator had broken through to the Xianqi layer, his spirit became more and more lifelike. A stronger spirit was of extremely useful during a battle, and helped to increase cultivation speed as well. At that moment, the bald leader seemed like he had become an eagle. He also possessed the precise vision of an eagle. When cultivators reached a certain level of cultivation, the latent energy of their spirit increased. Therefore, if a cultivator had a beast spirit, that beast spirit would be growing until it became monstrously strong and revealed its true powers. "Oh, is that so? Only a sword made of pure qi, nothing more?" said Lin Feng while smiling coldly. He then took a step forwards. His sword and deadly energies were getting stronger and stronger. "Die!" shouted Lin Feng. The battle energy left Lin Feng's body and rolled through the atmosphere. It was moving towards the bald leader at full speed. The crowd was astonished. Even though they were standing far away, they could sense Lin Feng's battle energy. It was extremely powerful. Lin Feng was fearless. All that was going through his mind was to kill his opponent. At that moment, Lin Feng looked like a warlord. "Die!" shouted the bald leader, whose voice was as sharp as that of an eagle's cry. His body transformed into a myriad of shadows which all moved towards Lin Feng. "Hey!" Behind Lin Feng, his purple spirit suddenly appeared. It turned into 100 snakes which all moved towards the bald leader and curled around his body, completely constricting him. The bald leader was shaking. The strength of the spirit could be sensed in the air. "Swallow!" shouted Lin Feng. These small snakes turned into a large venomous snake and started devouring the strength of the eagle spirit. These snake spirits were extremely corrosive, and it seemed like they were going to melt all the pure qi that was surrounding the bald leader's body. "Break!" furiously shouted the bald leader. His pure qi turned into a huge blade and rushed towards one of the snake illusions, piercing the purple spirit. However, immediately after, the myriad of purple snakes seemed to go into a frenzy. They formed a spiral around the bald leader and then started spinning at the speed of light. The strength of that spirit seemed incredible. Its movement seemed so precise and accurate. "Rise!" shouted Lin Feng furiously. A deadly light flashed in his eyes. 100 purple snakes suddenly curled around the bald leader's body, constricting him again. Lin Feng was relying on the strength of his spirit, which he made curl around the bald leader's body. The crowd was gasping with astonishment when they saw the scene. Lin Feng looked like a majestic war god. What a strong spirit! Lin Feng was so strong. His strange spirit seemed like it could transform itself as many times as he wished. This time 100 purple snakes had appeared and were all absorbing the leader's vitality. Besides, they were very useful to Lin Feng as they were constricting the bald leader's body. However, what the crowd didn't know was that Lin Feng, in order to carry out such precise attacks, had suffered incredible pain when using the surplus soul technique. He was releasing his surplus souls, which he then merged with his purple spirit. That was the only way for him to reach such a monstrous strength. His attack was also extremely accurate. He was controlling 100 snakes at the same time, and using them all to consume the leader's vitality. The vitality was nourishment for his soul. Lin Feng's eyes were closed, and he had the feeling that his soul was still too weak. This was the first time he was using such a colossal amount of his soul strength. Nonetheless, he couldn't stand it. It was too hard for him to control. Actually, Lin Feng couldn't imagine creating millions of surplus souls. Forget about billions, it sounded like a monstrous punishment to the body. Lin Feng, even though his eyes were closed, was releasing his battle energy. It was extremely dense. He was also endlessly releasing sword chi. It seemed like his sword was about ready to attack. At the same time, the face of the bald leader, who was still constricted by the snakes, turned rigid. His powerful pure chi turned into a resplendent blade. Slash! Shouted the bald leader furiously. His blade diffused a bright and dazzling light in the atmosphere. The purple spirit around his body was finally cut off and collapsed. But at that moment, Lin Feng's eyes, which were closed, slowly started to open. Deadly cross shadow. An incredible light in the shape of a cross appeared. Everybody couldn't believe their eyes. The crowd couldn't even follow it with their eyes as the attack was way too quick. There was only some battle energy, deadly chi and sword chi that could be sensed. The cross disappeared as quickly as it appeared and blood splashed through the air. The crowd was astonished when they saw the bald leader had fallen onto the ground. A large cross mark had appeared on his chest. It was pouring with blood. The powerful chi, the earth fusion, his godly sword, his purple spirit and the deadly cross shadow were all separate parts of Lin Feng's counterattack. Lin Feng's sword made from pure chi wasn't just a simple sword. That sword contained an incredible amount of battle energy. 8 moves, you still have 2 more, said Lin Feng, which broke the silence. 8 moves, there were still 2 more moves, but the loser was already clear and it wasn't Lin Feng, but instead it was the bald leader. In 10 moves, who would kill whom? The bald leader was using pure chi to heal his wounds, but at that moment he was already completely dispirited and depressed. The cross was glowing on his chest and his injury wasn't only external. The powerful sword chi had also invaded his body through the wound and damaged his internal organs. What a monstrous attack! What an amazing young man! People's hearts were pounding. Lin Feng was monstrously strong. Nothing was happening the way they had predicted. Lin Feng once again was giving birth to miracles. One strike, he had just needed a single strike, and his strength of the Ling Qi layer defeated a cultivator of the Xian Qi layer. That sword had completely changed people's perception of Lin Feng. Lin Feng had defeated a cultivator of the Xian Qi layer, and from that moment, they truly admired him. Lights were unceasingly flashing in Lan Jiao's eyes. She was staring at Lin Feng. What a daring young man! No wonder that her 1,000 evil illusions hadn't worked against him. Lin Feng wasn't an ordinary person, he was an incredible genius. Besides, at that moment, Bing Hitong's killing intent was exploding in his heart as he thought, how monstrous! Lin Feng really was a monster. He was much more frightening than all the disciples they had at the Ice and Snow Mountain village. If the Yunhai sect hadn't been exterminated, a disciple such as Lin Feng would have inevitably reached an even more monstrous level with the aid of a teacher. That guy had to die. Piece of trash! Shouted Emotsong Lan's evil voice. He moved to attack. At the same time, Mr. Hua moved as well, closely following him. He wouldn't give him an opportunity to attack Lin Feng. However, the person towards whom Emotsong Lan was rushing wasn't Lin Feng at all. Instead, it was the bald leader. "No!" shouted the bald leader as if he had just realized what was about to happen. His body was insanely shaking. He tried to escape, but at that moment, vines curled around his body, constricting him. In a flash, that vine turned into a blood-sucking plant monster, absorbing the bald leader's blood and flesh. The bald leader's blood and flesh was circulating through a system of the vines, and then penetrating straight into Songlan's body. The crowd was astonished and their hearts were pounding. What a terrifying skill! Songlan's vines were surprisingly absorbing the bald leader's flesh, blood and pure qi. The bald leader's face was distorted in pain and he looked terrified. His body was violently shaking, but one could see that he was powerless. However, Songlan looked like a greedy demon who was enjoying the taste of human flesh. Every member of the Condor Castle organization was incredibly scared of Songlan. They were all violently shaking. He was a true demon. Their great leader was a demon. Even in their most horrible thoughts, they would have never imagined that such an evil skill existed before they met him. A moment later, the bald leader's body had turned into a pile of skin and bones. His skin and bones were all that was left on the ground. Songlan recalled his vines back into his body and at that moment, took a deep breath while looking intoxicated with a euphoric happiness. Animal. Lin Feng's facial expression was ice-cold. Songlan, who had helped with the destruction of the Yunhai sect, had surprisingly learnt such demonic skills. That evil skill enabled the cultivator to swallow blood, flesh and pure qi. Once all these things had been extracted from the cultivator, they turned into a pile of skin and bones. That evil skill enabled the cultivator to swallow blood, flesh and pure qi. Once all these things had been extracted from the cultivator, they turned into a pile of skin and bones. Besides, Songlan had immediately swallowed everything without hesitation. How evil was that? Even though cultivators were usually ready to do most things to become stronger, they still set themselves some limits, otherwise what would be the difference between humans and beasts? Many people couldn't stand thinking about such an evil skill. Of course, there were also many people who were gasping in amazement at the evil skill. If they ever had the opportunity to obtain it, they would be delighted to learn and practice it. This was the world of cultivation. Only strength mattered and it came with a price. Songlan evilly glanced at Lin Feng and said while laughing, "Don't worry, I'll swallow the old man and then it'll be your turn." When he finished talking, he looked at Mr. Hua. Mr. Hua remained vigilant. Songlan's evil skill was way too deviant. Mr. Hua had to be very careful. "Lin Feng, get a bit farther away from here," said Mr. Hua as his body was suddenly surrounded by small balls of fire. They were burning with an intense heat as they rotated around his body. At that moment he didn't look crooked and sluggish, he looked like a god of fire. These bright and resplendent fireballs contained traces of pure qi. "All right," said Lin Feng while nodding. He moved back. Lin Feng could defeat cultivators of the first or second Xian Qi layer, but the third Xian Qi layer was already too much for him. He wasn't strong enough, therefore he was happy that Mr. Hua was there to fight for him. Third Xian Qi layer, that'll be a delicious meal," said Songlan while smiling evilly. Two vines emerged from his body and moved towards Mr. Hua to constrict his body. However, at that moment, two fireballs appeared in Mr. Hua's hands. He raised both of his hands and these two fireballs transformed into two dragons which immediately bombarded the atmosphere, moving straight towards these vines. Surprisingly, the vines started burning when coming into contact with the fire dragons. On the other side, Bing Hetung was attacking as well. Snowflakes were fluttering in the wind. Ice and frost were gradually covering the ground. It was his world of ice and snow skill which really caused the atmosphere to turn into a world of ice and snow. However, that terrifying coldness didn't affect Meng Qing at all. She did not feel cold. Actually, that attack had the opposite effect and even gave Meng Qing a pleasant and refreshing feeling. That pure and holy girl looked like a celestial being. Meng Qing was an expert when it came to ice. How could ice and snow energy affect her? It only made her stronger. "Frozen earth," said Bing Hetung in a low voice. Immediately, a layer white ice and frost covered the ground. It was becoming thicker and thicker. The entire atmosphere had turned into a frozen world. How cold! The crowd was shaking. People of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village were experts at using ice and snow-based skills. Obviously, it wasn't just a rumor that Frozen World skill was monstrously powerful. Meng Qing's silhouette flickered. She elegantly jumped into the air. Immediately after, an explosion sound resonated in the atmosphere. The ice where she was just standing had exploded. Many icicles shot up from the ground at that moment. Everybody was narrowing their eyes. Bing Hitong had made icicles to burst from the ground. He had used the ice from ground under Meng Qing's feet to carry out a surprise attack. What a sly method. Celestial ice, said Bing Hitong while shaking both his hands. Ice and snow were blotting out the sky. It seemed like everything had become ice and snow. Endless frost, said Meng Qing. A layer of ice chi immediately appeared in the air. In a flash, both her and Bing Hitong's bodies were covered with frost. The atmosphere was filled with an endless coldness which made everybody shake. Lin Feng was looking at the two battles which contained 4 cultivators of the Xianqi layer, who were fighting with each other. Mr. Hua and Emotsong Lan had both broken through to the 3rd Xianqi layer. Besides, they both had lots of experience considering their respective ages. They were both seniors in the world of cultivation. Mr. Hua's 2 fireballs were fluttering in the wind in a rhythm with his heartbeats. Emotsong Lan's vines were unable to approach Mr. Hua's fireballs. It would be very difficult for Emotsong Lan to defeat Mr. Hua. Besides, even though Meng Qing didn't have the same experience as her opponent, Lin Feng wasn't worried about her. Her body filled with a powerful ice chi. How could she be scared of ice and frost? Besides, she was extremely strong. Lin Feng didn't clearly understand how strong she was because each time he saw her fight, it seemed like she was stronger than the previous time. It seemed like the people of the Condor Castle organization and the Ice and Snow Mountain Village would all be very busy fighting on that day. The crowd also had the impression that things were changing too fast. The features of the terrain were constantly undergoing drastic changes. Besides, each time they thought that Lin Feng was going to get killed, it wasn't happening at all. The scariest part was that the people of the Condor Castle organization were even working together against Lin Feng, but Lin Feng was, as always, able to shock everyone. Lin Feng turned around and looked at the people who had come along with Bing Hitong. On his face appeared a cold and evil smile. Amongst these people, none of them were at the Xianqi layer. When these people saw that Lin Feng was looking at them, their facial expressions became rigid. Immediately after, a cold energy enveloped their bodies. Lin Feng wants to kill them. The hearts of these people on white horses started to pound. Lin Feng was able to defeat a cultivator of the Xianqi layer. Fighting him was way too dangerous for them. Lin Feng started moving and slowly walked towards them. All these people's bodies went stiff with fear. "What are you planning on doing?" said a member of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village towards Lin Feng. Immediately after, fear appeared on his face. "What am I doing?" A mocking expression appeared on his face. All these people had traveled over such a huge distance for the sole purpose of killing him, and now they were asking him what he was planning on doing? These people wanted to kill him, of course that Lin Feng planned to kill them in return. Nobody spoke any more nonsense. Behind Lin Feng's body appeared a vast and roaring purple lake which hovered in the air. It doesn't look good. When the people of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village saw the purple spirit emerge, their facial expressions changed drastically. Lin Feng's spirit was enough to constrict a cultivator of the Xianqi layer, so it was obviously strong enough to use against them. They turned their horses around and they wanted to leave. They didn't intend to fight back at all. Lin Feng smiled coldly. His spirit launched itself through the air. Countless small purple snakes emerged and attacked at the speed of light. In a flash, the small snakes had constricted their bodies and immediately after the purple lake swallowed them. They were all drowning into the immense purple lake. Ah! Horrible shrieks spread through the atmosphere. These members of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village were drowning in the lake, and their bodies were melting as if the lake was acid. They were desperately and hopelessly shouting in agony as their skin and flesh was melting. Did they want to die? They had come with the great elder of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village, Bing Hitong. How majestic! However, something they had never imagined, even in their dreams, was that a cultivator of the Lingqi layer would become their worst nightmare in Celestial River. "Will you dare?" At that moment, Bing Hitong's voice was ice-cold as he watched the scene unfold. He had brought all the outstanding disciples with him, He had brought them to acquire experience and Lin Feng was going to kill them all. Bing Hetung left Meng Qing behind and threw himself towards Lin Feng at full speed, while releasing a vast amount of ice qi. However, Meng Qing wouldn't let him touch Lin Feng. Both her hands shook, her soul was palpitating from nervousness. Meng Qing's body released a gigantic amount of ice qi. The crowd could even see her nervous expression. "Frozen heart," said Meng Qing. The strength of her ice qi bombarded the atmosphere. Bing Hetung started shaking violently. He abruptly turned around, however, at that moment, he groaned in agony. His black hair was covered with frost. "You want to kill me, but you thought that I wouldn't dare to offend you? What world would that even be possible?" said Lin Feng coldly as his purple spirit moved back inside his body. However, all the members of the Ice and Snow Mountain village had disappeared from sight, and there was no traces of them to be found. Bing Hetung's face turned deathly pale. His face was filled with murderous intent. However, at that moment he was fighting against Meng Qing. Immediately after, his killing intent became even more intense. Meng Qing, as before, was preventing him from approaching Lin Feng. Her eyes were filled with calm and serenity. Her heart seemed like it was made of ice. The members of the Ice and Snow Village Mountain have been massacred for offending Lin Feng, thought the crowd. At the beginning they had come for the sole purpose of killing Lin Feng, but in the end they were the ones who had been killed. After that, Bing Hetung tried to kill Lin Feng, but at that moment he was injured by Meng Qing. Besides, all his most outstanding disciples had been killed. The Ice and Snow Mountain Village wasn't the only group which had been punished for offending Lin Feng. The Condor Castle organization had suffered as well. The two vice leaders of the Condor Castle organization were both at the Xianqi lair. The first one had entered the restaurant and was killed. He hadn't even seen how he died. Then the bald leader had been defeated by Lin Feng and was killed under tragic circumstances, becoming a cultivation resource for Mo Songlan's demonic body. At that moment, the members of the Condor Castle organization were terrified. Maybe tomorrow, their group would only be a memory in Celestial River. Everything was happening because they tried to kill Lin Feng, a young man at the Lingqi lair. Those who offended him ended up dead. He was an amazing genius. He had even almost cut off one of Long Yu's arms, the best disciple of the Hao Yu sect, for using a blade in front of him. He had destroyed the Blade Master's confidence in his own ability to use blades. Lin Feng was like an evil deity. The battle continued in a deadlock. Mo Songlan and Mr. Hu's battle was tough and fierce. An evil qi and a fire qi were bombarding each other, but the battle seemed to be very evenly matched. It was hard to tell who would win. The battle continued in a deadlock. Mo Songlan and Mr. Hu's battle was tough and fierce. An evil qi and a fire qi were bombarding each other, but the battle seemed to be very evenly matched. It was hard to tell who would win. Mo Songlan's skills were evil. Mr. Hu's skills were precise. Bing Hetung's cultivation level was higher than Meng Qing's, but her fighting power had exceeded all expectations. Besides, a moment ago, he turned his back to her, which led to him being injured by her attack. Bing Hetung couldn't do anything against Meng Qing. Concerning the members of the Condor Castle organization, they did not want to go near Lin Feng. They didn't dare to draw his attention. His purple spirit was way too terrifying. It could swallow people and then melt them into nothing. How monstrous was that? It seems like Lin Feng is not going to die today, thought the crowd. He was so strong that Bing Hetung and Mo Songlan, who were acting together, couldn't even kill him. Was this because destiny said he would not die today, or was it because they were not strong enough to kill him? Mr. Hua and Meng Qing could take the two strongest opponents, while Lin Feng, who was gifted and strong, didn't fear fighting against the lower Xianqi layer cultivators. Therefore, all the opponents, who all belonged to influential groups, couldn't touch him. While the crowd was analyzing the situation, far away in the distance, appeared a white palanquin. On that white palanquin was a woman wearing a fine gauze on her face. For people were carrying that palanquin. At the same time, behind that palanquin, many people were running at full speed with only the tips of their toes touching the ground. They looked so graceful and they didn't even look like they were hurrying. It seemed like they lightly floated above the ground, which gave the crowd a surrealistic impression, as if it was a dream. In a flash, the group of silhouettes arrived to where the battle was taking place. They didn't join the battle though. The crowd was stupefied. Who were these people and what did they want this time? However, Lan Jiao, who was in the crowd, was surprised. Her silhouette flickered and she landed in front of the palanquin. She then said to the woman, "Aunt Yun, why are you here?" Aunt Yun removed her fine gauze and a beautiful mature woman's face appeared. She looked graceful and noble, cold and detached. She looked superior to other people to the extent that some people didn't dare look at her. "I came to solve some problems," said Aunt Yun while smiling. Immediately after, she looked at Lin Feng, who looked surprised because he was also looking at her. That woman didn't look young, but her skin looked splendid. Besides, she looked extremely elegant and her strength seemed exceptional. "Lin Feng, right?" said that mature woman to Lin Feng. "Indeed," said Lin Feng while nodding and added, "Is there a problem?" "There is a problem," said the mature woman while nodding and continued. "Lin Feng, last time at the Dream Pavilion, you obtained an ancient cauldron. It's useless for you and we would like to take it back. We will give you your purity stones back. How does that sound?" The ancient dragon cauldron. Lin Feng was stupefied. These people had come because of the ancient dragon cauldron. Lin Feng couldn't help but have a bad feeling. That woman was speaking in the name of the Dream Pavilion. She was obviously one of the management members. She had, against all expectations, come because of the dragon cauldron. She had likely found out what kind of item it was. In the frame of the auction, there is no rule which says that items have to be returned under any circumstance, said Lin Feng, sounding indifferent while looking at his interlocutor. He was obviously not willing to hand the cauldron over. The crowd was also puzzled. Lin Feng was right, since when did the people of the auction have the right to ask people to return acquired objects? That was impossible. Lin Feng, with the highest bid, had gained the cauldron, which now belonged to him. The story was fishy. "I can give you the double amount of purity stones for it to compensate for the loss," said Aunt Yun, sounding patient and calm. The double amount? Was the ancient dragon cauldron worth only 4,000 purity stones of medium quality? It was one of the 10 ancient cauldrons. It was priceless. It was a real treasure. "No need. I don't need purity stones. I like the cauldron very much," said Lin Feng indifferently. The cauldron was his. He didn't need to justify himself. "Lin Feng, you bought that cauldron for 2,000. Now I will give you 10,000 and you will give it back to me," continued Aunt Yun. "I said that I liked my cauldron and no matter how many purity stones you offer, I will not exchange it," said Lin Feng in a strict and firm manner which made a strange expression appear on the woman's face. "Aunt Yun, what's wrong?" said Lan Jiao, who felt that something was amiss. It seemed like something bad was about to happen between Aunt Yun and Lin Feng. Jiao, this has nothing to do with you," said Aunt Yun indifferently. Immediately after, she looked at Lin Feng again and said, "That cauldron is of no use for you. However, we need it. I hope that you can hand it over to the Dream Pavilion. We will inevitably be very grateful." Lin Feng, as before, shook his head. Finally, the woman's patience reached its limits. A cold energy appeared around her body, which made Lan Jiao shiver. "What a tragedy! You don't know how to distinguish good from evil," said Aunt Yun in a low voice. She could see the look on Lan Jiao's face was sad because of what was going to happen, but Lin Feng didn't recognize other people's kindness. "What if I want the item no matter what?" added Aunt Yun. Lin Feng was surprised. He then coldly said, "The Dream Pavilion sells things that other people have put up for auction. You, the Dream Pavilion, are just in charge of the selling. I obtained something and you gave the purity stones to the owner, but now, you come to me and ask me for the cauldron on behalf of the Dream Pavilion. What is that supposed to mean?" When the woman heard Lin Feng, she remained unmoved. She just said coldly, "All I'm saying is that you have to hand over the ancient cauldron or you will regret it. The consequences will be terrible." When the crowd heard the woman, they were astonished. Problems were occurring one after the other for Lin Feng. He didn't even have the time to solve the old problems and new ones were arising already. The Dream Pavilion surprisingly also wanted to fight against Lin Feng, but these people's strengths were much more terrifying than that of the Condor Castle organization. "Since when are the people of the Dream Pavilion so shameless?" said Mr. Hu jokingly. Fireballs were still emerging from his hand and rotating around him. He left Emotsonglan behind and moved back to Lin Feng. He was aggressively staring at Aunt Yun. I didn't know that the Dream Pavilion was so greedy. If other people tried to steal items obtained at the auction, I wouldn't be surprised, but you, the Dream Pavilion, I am not expecting you to protect the people who obtain items at your auction. I can understand that, but stealing those items yourself, don't you care about face? Many people secretly nodded when they heard Mr. Hua. Indeed, these people's behavior was way too exaggerated. That treasure had been obtained at their auction. They should protect their reputation instead of trying to steal from their own customers. Ha ha ha, laughed Emotsonglan. He glanced at Aunt Yun, smiled evilly and said, whether they are shameless or not will not be a problem for you once you're dead. Stop talking nonsense. Did you hear him? Said Aunt Yun to Lin Feng coldly. I don't want to kill you. If you obey and hand over the cauldron, I will not get involved, but if you don't... Aunt Yun! Shouted Lan Jiao, whose face had turned deathly pale. Aunt Yun originally wanted Lin Feng and her to become friends, but at that moment, she surprisingly was making an enemy and threatening to kill Lin Feng. Jiao Jiao, I already told you that all this is none of your business, said Aunt Yun, sounding cold. Lan Jiao bit her lip and remained silent. The Condor Castle organization and the Ice and Snow Mountain Village hadn't managed to touch Lin Feng. Could it be that the last group was going to manage what the others hadn't? The situation was clear to Lan Jiao. If Aunt Yun fought against Lin Feng, it would be a one-sided battle in her favor and Lin Feng would have no opportunity to escape the combined forces. At that moment, Meng Qing and Bing Hetung stopped fighting and Meng Qing moved back to Lin Feng's side. Lin Feng's facial expression was ice-cold. Lin Feng was constantly being threatened in Celestial River. These people were all influential and powerful, which is why they could threaten Lin Feng as much as they wished, because his strength still was not enough to deter these powerful groups. If Lin Feng had been extremely powerful, who would have dared speak to him that way? They even wanted to steal the treasure he had obtained at the auction. Very good, said Lin Feng while looking at Aunt Yun. An evil smile appeared on his face and he said coldly, you are very strong, which makes you think that you can threaten me whenever you want. If I don't give you what you want, you will kill me. You are convinced that the ancient cauldron is already yours, right? Aunt Yun frowned and saw that Lin Feng's smile was becoming more and more evil, and he then said, everybody has heard her words clearly. You now all know how shameless the people of the Dream Pavilion are. Surprisingly, they want to steal the ancient cauldron that I obtained in their establishment. Aunt Yun was stupefied and then said coldly, shut up. Shut up? You threaten me with death and now you want me to keep quiet about it? Do you think that the cauldron will automatically become yours once I die? You are naive, ridiculous, and utterly moronic, said Lin Feng while smiling indifferently. He then shouted at the top of his lungs, I have obtained an ancient cauldron which is surprisingly one of the 10 legendary cauldrons from the stories. The ancient cauldron is actually the cauldron of the heavenly dragons. One of the 10 legendary cauldrons from the stories, the ancient cauldron is actually the cauldron of the heavenly dragons. Lin Feng's voice was echoing through the atmosphere. One of the 10 legendary cauldrons from the stories, the ancient cauldron is actually the cauldron of the heavenly dragons. Lin Feng's voice was echoing through the atmosphere. People's hearts started to violently pound. Legendary cauldrons were extremely precious. Even though they didn't know what the true name Heavenly Dragon of the Nine Skies, or exactly what it meant, considering the name they could imagine its price. It seemed to be a priceless treasure from ancient times. The Dream Pavilion doesn't care about violating the rules. They have come to steal a treasure. The crowd had no doubts when it came to Lin Feng's words. On that day, many people had seen Lin Feng come out of the Dream Pavilion with his legendary cauldron. But surprisingly, at that moment the Dream Pavilion surprisingly wanted to have it back. Obviously, that ancient cauldron was priceless. Otherwise, the Dream Pavilion wouldn't care. The crowd was filled with excitement. They wished they could have obtained such an item. Mr. Hua glanced at Lin Feng. Fire was burning in his eyes. He was an alchemist. He concocted pills. He had already heard about these legendary cauldrons once or twice. These cauldrons all had a common point. They could be used by alchemists to concoct powerful pills and were all priceless. When using an ordinary cauldron, one could only concoct Xian-level pills of lower quality, while when using the cauldron of the heavenly dragons, One could concoct Xian-level pills of medium quality or above. Even though it was only a slight improvement in quality, it still made a huge difference. It was the difference between day and night. For example, Xian-level pills of lower quality could be used by cultivators between the first and the third Xian-Qi layer, while Xian-level pills of medium quality could be used by cultivators between the fourth and sixth Xian-Qi layer. That was a 3-layer difference, therefore it was a huge difference. Ha ha ha. Emote Songlan was laughing demonically. The more he used his evil skill, the more evil and sinister he became. He didn't look like a human being anymore. He realized that he was interested in the cauldron of the heavenly dragons as well. He was as interested in the cauldron as he was in killing Lin Feng. Bing Hetung was astonished as well. If the Ice and Snow Mountain village could obtain such a treasure, how beneficial would it be? No. If I had such a treasure, would I even need to go back to the sect? Bing Hetung was secretly excited. If he had such a treasure and went back to the sect, the treasure wouldn't be his anymore. It would become the property of the Ice and Snow Mountain village. Besides, considering the strength of the Ice and Snow Mountain village, maybe they wouldn't be able to protect the cauldron. It would be too hard to protect it. Maybe when it came to such a heavy responsibility, it was best to leave Shuiyu and take the treasure with him. Everybody was already dreaming about getting the heavenly dragon cauldron. All the strong cultivators were wondering why they weren't the ones who bought the cauldron, even though they had never even thought about it. At that moment, Aunt Yoon looked glum. Before arriving, she hadn't thought that Lin Feng would know about the heavenly dragon cauldron, which is why she had offered a high price in the beginning. But later on, whatever the price, Lin Feng kept refusing over and over again. Therefore, she had guessed that Lin Feng probably knew about the cauldron. Besides, she had threatened Lin Feng's life. But it hadn't been enough. Lin Feng had made the truth publicly known. That was a great loss for her. Even if she obtained the cauldron, she wouldn't necessarily be able to leave Shuiyu. Everybody would quickly know about the heavenly dragon cauldron. Everybody will know about the treasure if I obtain it, thought Aunt Yoon. She was staring at Lin Feng and her face was filled with murder. You want to kill me? Lin Feng had a cold smile on his face and immediately said, Emote Songlan Bing Hetung, I know that you all want to kill me, but even if you kill me, have you thought about who would get the treasure? Lin Feng sounded cold and indifferent. Emote Songlan and Bing Hetung remained silent. The Dream Pavilion was one of the 3 biggest marketplaces in Celestial River. They had such a large power and influence that the Condor Castle couldn't rival them. All the objects that appeared in their auction room were treasures, yet no one dared to try and steal the treasures. They certainly were extremely strong. However, if we kill the people of the Dream Pavilion first, we can solve our personal problems after. Then we won't be bothered by a stronger third party. Wouldn't that be a better solution? Said Lin Feng. In the world, there were no definite enemies. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Even though Emote Songlan and Bing Hetung wanted to kill him and Lin Feng also wanted to kill them, he knew that if they acted at the same time as the Dream Pavilion, he wouldn't have a single chance. Lin Feng was just trying to create tension between them so that they would, at least, not collaborate to kill him. Lin Feng? Lan Jiao was looking at Lin Feng while unceasingly shaking her head. She hadn't thought that Aunt Yoon and Lin Feng would fight each other to death. She wants to kill me. Should I let her kill me without retaliation? Said Lin Feng, sounding indifferent while looking at Lan Jiao, which made her speechless. Aunt Yoon wanted to kill Lin Feng. What could Lin Feng do? He had no choice but to return his killing intent. When Bing Hetung heard Lin Feng, lights flashed in his eyes. Lin Feng was right. Even if they collaborated with Aunt Yoon and killed Lin Feng, they were in Celestial River, they weren't at the Ice and Snow Mountain village. Even if they obtained the Heavenly Dragon Cauldron, they wouldn't be able to leave with it as long as the Dream Pavilion wanted it. Ha ha ha. Emote Songlan was laughing evilly. He then said, I will not join anyone. Old fool. Cursed Lin Feng. Emote Songlan was really evil. He didn't wait for Bing Hetung, who wasn't as strong as him, to reply and had given his answer. If the two didn't help, Lin Feng and the people of the Dream Pavilion would fight. The other two would just sit and watch them fight and then attack the winner. Then it didn't matter whether it was Lin Feng or the Dream Pavilion who won, they would inevitably be injured. However, even they didn't help. Lin Feng's goal was to get rid of the 2 cultivators of the 3rd Xian-Qi layer, and then fight against the people of the Dream Pavilion. Aunt Yun at that moment was staring at Lin Feng. From the stories, he was not someone who would lie down and be killed easily, but could it really be that bad? Even though they had only a fraction of the power in Celestial River, they were still strong enough to kill Lin Feng. "Since you want to die, I will help you achieve your aim," said Aunt Yun coldly. She then jumped off the palanquin. She was extremely quick. At the same time, the silhouettes of the 4 cultivators carrying the palanquin flickered. They all landed on her sides. They were releasing a deadly qi. Amongst these 4 people, who were women, none of them were mediocre cultivators. All of them had broken through to the first Xian Qi layer. The people of the Dream Pavilion are so strong. Lin Feng was stupefied. Aunt Yun was extremely powerful when compared to the other women. "You 4 can kill him and then his ring with the Na stone," said Aunt Yun while pointing to Lin Feng. She sounded indifferent. Lin Feng had no power or influence in Celestial River. He couldn't just walk away with the precious treasure when there were stronger people present. That was why these 4 people were here to kill Lin Feng. "I will handle these 2, said Aunt Yun while rolling up her sleeves. Her silhouette flickered and in a flash, she appeared in front of Mr. Hua and Meng Qing. Her long sleeves were fluttering in the wind. In a flash, an endless quantity of illusions appeared. It seemed like there was an endless quantity of clones. In a flash, Meng Qing and Mr. Hua's silhouettes had disappeared. Third Xian Qi layer. Emo Tsonglan and Bing Hetung had lots of experience. They could, obviously, sense other people's strength. They could see that that woman had broken through to the third Xian Qi layer like them. However, she had immediately challenged Meng Qing and Mr. Hua alone. Those 2 could rival Emo Tsonglan and Bing Hetung in power. What a strong and aggressive woman. People's hearts were pounding. After that move, it seemed like she was the only person in the entire world. Aunt Yun's 1,000 illusions skill is becoming stronger and stronger, whispered Lan Jiao. She was lost though because she already had feelings for Lin Feng, but at that moment, Aunt Yun wanted to kill him. In the middle of a whistling hurricane, Meng Qing and Mr. Hua had recovered from the illusions. These 1,000 illusions didn't emit any sound, but everybody could feel the terrifying power in the attack. A careless move and it was easy to get severely injured in the middle of such an attack, or even die in a pitiful manner. At that moment the 4 women also attacked. Their sleeves were fluttering in the wind. Like illusions, in a flash they surrounded Lin Feng. Lin Feng was unable to escape even if he grew wings. Boom! Coldness invaded the entire atmosphere. Lin Feng frowned and raised his head and looked at the 3 silhouettes fighting. It seemed like Meng Qing was furious. She wanted to leave the 1,000 illusions and join Lin Feng. "Meng Qing, don't worry about me," shouted Lin Feng. It was clear to Lin Feng that Meng Qing was ready to do anything for him. Besides, he even knew that Meng Qing had a strange ability to increase her power several-fold when needed. But using it created an infinite coldness which invaded her body. He didn't want Meng Qing to use it. Lin Feng preferred to suffer alone. "It's my turn." Lin Feng took a deep breath. 100 surplus souls emerged. Around his body was releasing a terrifying qi. A strange light flashed in these 4 women's eyes. Their sleeves fluttered in the wind while they all started to punch towards Lin Feng. Punches were moving towards Lin Feng from all 4 sides. A strange light flashed in these 4 women's eyes. Their sleeves fluttered in the wind while they all started to punch towards Lin Feng. Punches were moving towards Lin Feng from all 4 sides. These women had all broken through to the Xian Qi layer. Even though they had just broken through to the first Xian Qi layer, their opponent was only a cultivator of the Ling Qi layer. Aunt Yun had assigned 4 people to kill Lin Feng because she wanted to make sure that Lin Feng would die. She didn't want to waste time and let more troubles arise. A soft and pliable pure qi was whistling in the atmosphere and moving straight towards Lin Feng. An ordinary cultivator of the Ling Qi layer wouldn't be able to withstand a single attack such as this. SSS. Lin Feng's purple spirit transformed into a gigantic purple dragon. It was a dozen meters high. It curled up around Lin Feng's body and moved Lin Feng onto its head. In a flash, Lin Feng appeared a dozen meters high in the air looking down on everybody. What a monstrous spirit! When the crowd saw that gigantic purple dragon, they were astonished. However, they didn't know what kind of spirit it was exactly that Lin Feng had, but it looked extremely strong. At that moment, Lin Feng's eyes were slightly closed. He was, as before, releasing a terrifyingly powerful qi. His surplus souls were floating above his dragon spirit. Die! Shouted the 4 women on the ground. They jumped up in the air and threw themselves towards Lin Feng. Release! Said Lin Feng in a low voice. A terrifying qi invaded the entire atmosphere. The purple dragon started shaking violently, and it raised its head high into the air. Ss. The dragon was unleashing a dragon chant. Its 2 eyes, which looked enormous, became even scarier. At the same time its body became even bigger, it became monstrously gigantic. That small dragon that was like a snake now transformed and looked like a terrifying purple dragon. Ss. The dragon howled in fury. Its head rushed towards the 4 women with its huge mouth wide open. It wanted to swallow them. Animal! Furiously shouted Aunt Yun while looking at Lin Feng. She left Meng Qing and Mr. Hua and attempted to rush over to Lin Feng. She had thought that these 4 women, with their strength, would need only a few seconds to kill Lin Feng, but she hadn't thought that Lin Feng had other plans. Lin Feng was full of mysteries and surprises. Stay here, said Mr. Hua furiously. If she wanted to fight, they had to fight, and if she wanted to leave, she thought that she could leave as she pleased. Mr. Hua, old as he was, couldn't tolerate that. That was a huge humiliation. A fire light streaked through the sky towards Aunt Yun like a fireball. Aunt Yun was startled for a few seconds. She couldn't deal with Lin Feng. She abruptly turned around and saw the fireball move towards her at full speed. Boom! The fireballs exploded in the atmosphere. Immediately after, the atmosphere became extremely cold. Meng Qing had arrived as well. Crackling and explosion sounds were uninterruptedly spreading through the air. In a flash, it seemed like the atmosphere had gone from intense heat to freezing coldness. The fireballs were surrounded by ice. Ice and fire, when working together, increased in strength. Lin Feng was on the other side in the air. At that moment, he was on the enormous tail of the dragon. Besides, the gigantic purple dragon opened its colossal mouth and immediately swallowed one of the 4 women, and she was instantly eaten alive. One cultivator of the Xianqi layer had just died. At that moment, the dragon didn't look like a spirit anymore. It looked like a real terrifying dragon, as if it was alive. How could a spirit be alive? The crowd was astonished. The spirit was something innate and was a part of the soul. It played an important role in the path of cultivation. It could be used to enhance techniques or enlightenment during battles. When the cultivation level increased, the spirit became stronger as well. However, they believed the spirit was just a support for the cultivator and did not have life. They had never seen Lin Feng's spirit before, and it seemed like it had a life of its own. At that moment, Lin Feng was on the tail of the dragon and had his eyes closed. Besides, the pupils of the dragon were filled with endless coldness. If you want to kill me, just try it. People's hearts were pounding. They had the impression that their heads were exploding in shock. That voice had come from the mouth of the dragon. However, it was Lin Feng's voice. It's Lin Feng. That purple dragon is Lin Feng. The crowd was dumbstruck. They looked at these gigantic eyes, which looked expressionless and incredibly cold. These eyes were those of a human. Lin Feng could control his spirit and bring it to life. Phew. People in the crowd took a deep breath. How scary. Lin Feng had absolute control over his spirit. People in the crowd were not the ones who were astonished. Those few extremely strong cultivators of the Xianqi layer were all astonished. Lin Feng's abilities were very mysterious. Mo Tsonglan's face was filled with evil intentions. What a great method. He definitely wanted that ability as well. Lin Feng was a priceless treasure to him. At that moment, the 3 women of the Xianqi layer managed to free themselves from the attacks of the purple dragon and landed onto the ground. They were breathing quickly and felt cold in their hearts. What a terrifying young man. They were not the only ones who thought that Lin Feng was terrifying. Everybody thought the same. So that's how it was. He had killed the 2 vice leaders of the Condor Castle organization without using his full strength. No wonder he didn't fear them and was determined to stay in Celestial River. However, Lin Feng hadn't expected so many people would keep attacking him one after the other when he was dealing with Condor Castle. First it was the Ice and Snow Mountain Village, then the Dream Pavilion. They all wanted to kill him. Fortunately, Mr. Hua was there to help. The purple dragon was fixedly staring at the people down on the ground. When Lin Feng was at the Golden Z Mountain in MOU, the cultivators of the Z government used a purple energy. They could control their spirits and increase the strength of their spirit. This is what Lin Feng was using. He had obtained the memories of the cultivator of the Zunqi layer and spent 6 months practicing in secret. He had learnt the how to use surplus souls and could now already make 100 surplus souls appear, which all contained the power of his soul. He was combining that power with the power of his spirit. Thus, when using these surplus souls and injecting them into his spirit, he could bring his spirit into reality and it would become monstrously strong. If he had only relied on the strength of a single soul and tried to control his spirit, his dragon would have been strong, but it wouldn't have been enough to defeat these 4 women of the Xianqi layer. Therefore, he had used all of his surplus souls to inject them into his spirit and increase its strength. His snake thus had even more power as well. That splendid method was called the Ode to the Spirit. Die! Shouted Lin Feng coldly. Immediately after, the dragon rushed through the atmosphere with a whistling sound. The purple lake from before had been entirely swallowed by Lin Feng's snake spirit, and that purple lake turned out to be the blood of a Zun-level dragon. Besides, there were the remnants of its willpower and determination in that blood. The gigantic dragon moved. It seemed like the entire world was under the pressure of that terrifying creature. Fear invaded the heart of these 3 female cultivators of the Xianqi layer. That gigantic snake definitely had the strength of a Xian-level beast. Besides, it was also extremely brutal, violent, and agile. Concerning the women, they were experts at creating illusions. Unfortunately, it wouldn't be very useful against Lin Feng's spirit. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Cursed the 3 women furiously. Their silhouettes flickered and many illusions appeared floating above the ground. The crowd was dazzled and felt they were hallucinating after seeing so many illusions. Fools! Shouted Lin Feng's furious voice, and his eyes were as cold as before. He was determined and tenacious. There wasn't the least bit of hesitation in his actions. Illusions? They probably didn't know that at this moment, Lin Feng's purple dragon spirit was filled with the power of several surplus souls. Lin Feng's eyes were closed and he was in fusion with the earth. He could see through the illusions clearly in his mind, therefore so could all of his surplus souls. Ah! 2 piercingly sharp shrieks emerged. A huge quantity of illusions vanished. 2 female cultivators of the Xianqi layer had just disappeared after being swallowed by the purple dragon. The arrogant female cultivator of the Xianqi layer who was standing in front of the dragon seemed absolutely tiny and insignificant, at least in comparison with the dragon. There was only one left. From the 4 female cultivators of the first Xianqi layer, only one was left. She was standing there looking at that gigantic creature and shaking. She had just seen her 3 sisters being swallowed by the spirit. How could she not be terrified? Her determination and willpower had already been crushed. The monstrous and gigantic spirit was coldly staring at her. She was getting more and more frightened with each second. Finally, she decided to give up and turned around to run. She didn't want to fight anymore. She wanted to escape. A cultivator of the Xianqi layer wasn't fighting anymore. She wanted to flee. Unfortunately, she didn't have the possibility of escaping. The gigantic dragon started moving as if in a frenzy. In a flash, he swallowed her body, which immediately disappeared. With that, the 4 female cultivators of the Xianqi layer had all died. Boom! A violent and heavy wave of energy spread through the air. Aunt Yun moved away from Mr. Hua and Meng Qing. When she saw that the 4th female cultivators had disappeared, a horrible and evil expression appeared on her face. You killed them all. Her face was distorted with murderous intentions. She didn't look calm and indifferent anymore. Not only did I kill them, but I will also kill everyone else from the Dream Pavilion, said the purple dragon, sounding ice cold. When you came to kill me, you should have prepared for death. However, at that moment Meng Qing and Mr. Hua were preventing her from doing so. She couldn't even move closer to Lin Feng. Besides, Mo Tsonglan and Bing Hetung were smiling coldly. They both had ice-cold, evil smiles on their faces. They hadn't expected such happy circumstances. For them, the more devastating that battle was, the more advantageous it was for them. The gigantic purple dragon slowly turned around. Its eyes looked as cold as before and it glanced at the crowd. The crowd looked at Lin Feng, but what they didn't know was that Lin Feng, at that moment, was exhausted and had almost no strength remaining. Using the ode to the spirit, was using the strength of his soul to boost his spirit's power, and then make his spirit transform into a ferocious dragon. It was extremely tiresome for his soul and vitality. Lin Feng already had the impression that he was about to faint from exhaustion. Songlan had a huge smile on his face. He was slowly walking forward, taking small steps. Suddenly he jumped into the air, throwing himself at Lin Feng. An endless quantity of vines appeared in the air and moved towards Lin Feng at full speed. Even though that purple dragon was terrifying, Songlan had sensed that the purple dragon was just Lin Feng's spirit, and that it wasn't a real dragon. Besides, it only had the strength of the first Xianqi layer, but that was still sufficient to kill 4 people of the first Xianqi layer. However, it wouldn't be enough against Songlan. In such circumstances, if Songlan managed to kill Lin Feng, the purple dragon would collapse by itself. SSSSSat. The dragon moved towards the vines. The vines were becoming longer and longer and started twining around the dragon's body. A bloodthirsty chi emerged from the vines and the purple dragon was finally defeated. It transformed into a purple lake and rushed back towards Lin Feng's body. Lin Feng couldn't endure it anymore, he was too exhausted. He fell down onto the ground and opened his eyes. He saw these bloodthirsty vines coming towards him. At the same time, an ice-cold chi enveloped his body. Songlan and Bing Hetung were attacking Lin Feng together. They wanted to kill him and steal the cauldron. "You plan to kill me?" said Lin Feng, smiling with a warm smile on his face. He didn't feel threatened at all. His body flickered, a light flashed, and suddenly, an ancient cauldron appeared in Lin Feng's hand. It contained a mysterious ancient chi. When the ancient cauldron appeared, everybody was stupefied. At that moment, Lin Feng had taken out the ancient cauldron. It was obviously the heavenly dragon cauldron. The crowd, who had no hope of ever being able to touch the cauldron, was still very excited when it appeared, and had hope again. What if a miracle happened and they were able to get it? "You all want the heavenly dragon cauldron? Here, you can have it," shouted Lin Feng furiously. Immediately, the heavenly dragon cauldron flew through the air towards Songlan. Lin Feng was offering it to him. Songlan was astonished. His vines stopped moving towards Lin Feng. Instead, he used them to catch the cauldron. Immediately after, he vigorously pulled it towards him. In a flash, it was almost in Songlan's hands. Bing Hetung released some ice energy and threw himself at Songlan. At that moment, he had already forgotten about Lin Feng. Even though Lin Feng had killed his disciples of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village, they were less important than that ancient cauldron. If he managed to get that ancient cauldron, he would leave Shuiyu and go to even greater and more important places. How could Bing Hetung miss the opportunity to get the ancient cauldron? He wasn't the only one to think that way. Because of Lin Feng, Protector Kong had killed Wuxia, Songlan's son, and Songlan hated Lin Feng even more for that. But just before, when Songlan obtained the cauldron, he immediately focused on storing the cauldron and started running away at an incredible speed. People couldn't even believe their eyes. He didn't think that it would be that easy to acquire the heavenly dragon cauldron. Songlan, at that moment, couldn't help but look up at the sky and feel overjoyed. He hadn't killed Lin Feng yet, but after getting monstrously strong, he would come back and easily be able to kill Lin Feng. He didn't need to rush. The most important thing was to stay safe and leave with the cauldron. "Where are you going?" shouted Aunt Yun furiously. She jumped into the air and threw herself at Songlan, forgetting about Lin Feng for the time being. At that moment, Meng Qing and Mr. Hu didn't stop them. They instead moved back to Lin Feng's side. They were looking at the people who were farther and farther away. "It's not that easy to obtain the heavenly dragon cauldron," said Mr. Hu indifferently. Mr. Hu's eyes were filled with admiration while looking at Lin Feng. Lin Feng, when he was threatened by the people of the Dream Pavilion, hadn't taken the ancient cauldron out, but when the situation had turned out to be really dangerous, he immediately threw away an incredibly precious treasure, without regret or hesitation. Courage, insight, cunning and resolution, coupled with Lin Feng's natural talent, would definitely turn him into an incredibly strong cultivator. Lin Feng's face turned deathly pale. He was smiling indifferently and took out a sheet, a pill recipe. Mr. Hua, this is the recipe for spirit blood pills. Keep it safe. I will copy some other recipes for you, said Lin Feng while giving the recipe to Mr. Hua. If he hadn't been helped by Mr. Hua, maybe the outcome of these battles would have been different. He wouldn't even have been able to resist to Emotsong Lan and Bing Hetung. Lin Feng would remember that favor forever. Mr. Hua looked delighted, without adhering to formalities with Lin Feng. He immediately put away the recipe and immediately handed a ring to Lin Feng while saying, "These are the things that you have asked me to get. Keep them safe." "Thank you," said Lin Feng while taking the ring. He immediately said, "Mr. Hua, how advanced is your knowledge when it comes to pills?" So. I have no problem concocting Ling-level pills. I can make some Xian-level pills of lower quality as well, but it doesn't always succeed. I have about a 10% success rate. I am unable to make pills of higher levels. Xian-level pills of lower quality. 10% success rate. Mr. Hua's abilities when it came to concocting pills were already extremely advanced. Having a 10% success rate when it came to concocting Xian-level pills of lower quality was not a great success rate, but it was very high compared to others, which was why the demand for Xian-level pills were high. Mr. Hua certainly had many people who were interested in his services. "Mr. Hua, are you interested in concocting some pills with me? You could also teach a few things about pills," asked Lin Feng. Mr. Hua remained silent for a while and then said while smiling, "Concocting pills together, no problem, but don't you want to chase the heavenly dragon cauldron? I'm not strong enough to own such a valuable item. How could I even get it back?" said Lin Feng while shaking his head and smiling. "If you cannot get it back, at least you should make things hard for them. These days, the news that the heavenly dragon cauldron is in Celestial River will spread very quickly. If anyone wants it, it will not be easy for anyone, at least for a certain period of time. In Celestial River, it will be a bloodbath because of the ancient cauldron. Even though, relying on your own strength, you are not necessarily able to take it back since you have pill recipes, I could ask some old friends to help, then it might not be that difficult to get it back," said Mr. Hua while smiling. Lin Feng looked delighted. Since the precious treasure was there, many extremely strong people were going to try and steal it. The strongest ones could defeat a few of their opponents, but it wouldn't be an easy task to exterminate all those interested in the cauldron. In a secret room, Lin Feng was sitting cross-legged and his eyes were firmly closed. Carefree and indifferent, Lin Feng was fused with the earth. In a secret room, Lin Feng was sitting cross-legged and his eyes were firmly closed. Carefree and indifferent, Lin Feng was fused with the earth. A long thread of pure qi was fluctuating. It contained Lin Feng's soul energy. Lin Feng was practicing his surplus souls technique. It had been 2 days since the battle between the multiple groups. During these 2 days, Lin Feng had only been sitting in that secret room practicing cultivation. Nothing else. His pure qi had recovered, the strength of his soul had also recovered at the same time. He had improved the speed of his surplus soul ability. The strength of his soul was becoming stronger and stronger. He was also able to make even more surplus souls appear. He could make an even stronger purple spirit appear. In a battle, he would be much stronger than before. Lin Feng needed to be extremely strong. Therefore, before even having completely recovered from his injuries, Lin Feng had already started developing the number of his surplus souls. In order to become stronger, even if it was extremely difficult, Lin Feng was ready and willing to endure the pain and suffering required. He didn't want to be threatened by other people. He didn't want to rely on Meng Qing and other people each time a situation appeared where someone wanted to kill him. It was embarrassing for Lin Feng to be so weak. The fact that Meng Qing protected him once in a while was not a problem, but it couldn't always be the case. Time passed and the 3rd day was already over. In that secret room, many purity stones of medium quality had already disappeared. But Lin Feng's ability to absorb pure qi was growing stronger. A white light was fluctuating in the atmosphere, emitting whistling sounds. It was violently penetrating into Lin Feng's body. Lin Feng had the impression that he was intoxicated. It was so comfortable. The pure qi was revolving faster and faster around Lin Feng. Lin Feng's body was glittering and looked translucent. In the middle of the dazzling light, there was an incredible strength which seemed to be endless. It was the strength of pure qi, even though they were only small threads of pure qi. The fact that he was now absorbing enough pure qi for it to be visible implied that Lin Feng was getting closer and closer to reaching the Xian qi layer. Boom! A soft explosion emerged inside Lin Feng's body. An endless supply of pure qi drowned into Lin Feng's body from heaven and earth. Besides, at the same time, a thread of pure qi emitted a bright and dazzling light and then immediately vanished. Phew! Lin Feng, whose eyes were closed, slightly opened his mouth and took a deep breath. He opened his eyes and looked so delighted that his eyes were twinkling. 9th Ling Qi layer. I still have one more step before I break through to the Xian qi layer. Now it's only a small step away, thought Lin Feng. For months, Lin Feng had dedicated all his time to studying the Zun qi layer cultivator's memories and techniques. He had not reached the 9th Ling qi layer as he was focusing on the pure qi and techniques rather than just absorbing qi. After the last big battle, he finally believed he now had enough understanding of pure qi and could successfully advance. He had finally broken through to the 9th Ling qi layer, but was still a small step away from breaking through to the Xian qi layer. Even though Lin Feng had broken through to the 9th qi layer, he didn't stand up. He slowly closed his eyes again and kept practicing his surplus soul technique. Lin Feng couldn't afford to relax and be lazy. No matter how tiresome, how painful, everything that he did was in accordance with his beliefs. Everything he did was because of his incredible ambition to not get bullied anymore, and to put a stop to the people who wanted to kill him. Lin Feng spent 7 days in the secret room focusing on getting stronger. Outside of the secret room was a spacious guest room, but nobody was inside at that moment. In the room next to Lin Feng's cultivation room, it was dark. From outside, that cultivation room looked like shelf, but nobody knew that it was actually an entrance to a secret room. Meng Qing was probably cultivating as well. After all, that big battle had made her exhausted as well. Where is Mr. Hua? Thought Lin Feng. He started walking to the guest room and opened the door and entered. Inside, it was a scenery filled with charm and beauty. There were many rooms. In one of the rooms, a vast and boundless heat had invaded the atmosphere. Apart from that heat, it also smelt like medicine. No, it's not correct. Mr. Qi, that's not correct. The 1,000 lotus flower leaves have to melt first and then they can be put into the mixture. Then we have to use our soul to control it. The sounds of people arguing could be heard in the room where the heat came from. It was precisely Mr. Hua's voice. It seemed like he was arguing with someone else about something. Mr. Hua, you are wrong. If you first melt the lotus leaves and then put them into the mixture, you will lose half of the medicinal strength when you add them to the mixture, and it will be impossible to concoct Xian-level spirit blood pills, said the other voice. It seemed like that person was an old man like Mr. Hua. Besides, his voice sounded like he was stubbornly persisting in his own opinion. It seems like Mr. Hua and his friend were concocting Xian-level spirit blood pills, and that they didn't agree with each other, thought Lin Feng. Immediately after, he entered the room in which they were concocting pills. Apart from Mr. Hua, Lin Feng saw another old man. He was sitting down on a chair. Both of them were staring at the other. It seemed like they were unable to persuade each other. Besides, next to them was a huge cauldron. Mr. Hua had taken the recipe of the spirit blood pills and was discussing it with the other old man. Obviously, they were very well acquainted. Lin Feng glanced at the two old men and then looked at the red-haired old man. His heart started beating a bit faster. He recognized the old man who was with Mr. Hua. It was the old man who bid on the heavenly dragon cauldron in the auction room, but who, in the end, let Lin Feng get it. The red-haired old man, when he saw Lin Feng, smiled and nodded. "Senior," said Lin Feng while slightly bowing as a sign of respect. "Lin Feng, you provided us with the recipe of the spirit blood pills. We need you to tell us, do we have to make the lotus leaves melt first and then add them to the mixture or not?" asked Mr. Hua. He was only concerned about his argument with the red-haired old man. "Stop talking nonsense. If you melt them first and add them to mixture, would your soul be strong enough to control the leaves so that their essence spreads evenly in the concoction? If the pills are not perfectly balanced with all the ingredients, can you still concoct Xian-level spirit blood pills?" said the red-haired old man, getting angry again. When Lin Feng saw these two old men argue, he smiled. In that world, being able to exchange ideas while insulting each other, but remaining friendly was also an enviable thing. it could mean that a friendship had already reached a certain degree. Mr. Hua Sr., I also did some research about that recipe, but my pill concoction abilities are extremely basic. I'm not able to concoct spirit blood pills, but I would like to have a try with the guidance from you, my seniors. We could see if Mr. Hua's suggestion works, even if there is no guarantee that it will work," said Lin Feng, who made the red-haired old man frown. "Lin Feng, who are you calling a senior? Call me Mr. Qi, damn it. Maybe because you have never concocted pills before, but the more people doesn't mean the merrier. It's actually the opposite and can get chaotic. People synchronize their souls in perfect harmony. Concocting pills is an extremely rigorous process. Each step of the procedure is of highest importance. One careless move and the whole thing would be lost. Besides, it can lead to the cauldron being damaged or destroyed," said the red-haired old man, sounding solemn and respectful. One person was more appropriate than two when concocting pills. "I know about that, obviously, but maybe I have a solution," said Lin Feng while smiling. Immediately after, he sat next to Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi, in front of the cauldron. "You are two senior alchemists, you can feel the strength of a soul," said Lin Feng. Immediately after, he closed his eyes. Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi glanced at each other, and then immediately closed their eyes. They then all started releasing the strength of their soul, and slowly let it flow out. In a flash, Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi could feel the strength of each other's souls. It seemed like there were two sets of eyes angrily staring at each other. Their souls were in the atmosphere, but their souls were at odds. Every person was unique and would see things in their own way. It was impossible for two people to have perfectly identical beliefs and opinions, which was why it was difficult for several people to concoct pills together. However, at that moment an illusion slowly appeared. It was Lin Feng's soul. That bright illusion immediately wrapped up the two old men's souls, and in a flash, it seemed like their souls had entered another world. These three people's souls seemed to be following the same pace and rhythm, as if they were joined through a special connection. The bright illusion moved their soul power into the cauldron. Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi could distinctly and clearly perceive what Lin Feng's soul was doing as if it was their own soul. It was a mysterious and mystical moment. At that moment, the light vanished from the atmosphere. That mysterious sensation vanished as well. Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi's souls suddenly became at odds again. They recalled their souls back into their bodies and opened their eyes. They were both looking at Lin Feng. They looked delighted. "Earth fusion. Indeed, I have broken through the earth dimension," said Lin Feng while nodding. Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi remained silent for a while, and then both burst into an insane laughter. "Mr. Hua, the fact that you have met Lin Feng is a stroke of luck. He knows the secret of earth fusion, which even we could only dream of. Thanks to him, we can concoct at the same time, while maintaining the efficiency to a high level," said Mr. Qi while smiling. Before, it was impossible for Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi to concoct pills together. But since Lin Feng had the power of earth fusion, they would be able to concoct pills together, and their souls could work together. They could clearly divide the work without interfering with the other. This made the chance of errors occurring very low. As alchemists, Lin Feng didn't need to beg them to accept working with him. It was a great chance for them to increase their knowledge and abilities by working together. At that moment, Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi were not arguing anymore. Mr. Hua nodded, smiled, then said, "It's a strike of luck indeed. Lin Feng has only been practicing cultivation for less than a decade. Yet he can already fuse with the earth. He can also defeat cultivators of the Qianqi layer, even though he only had the power of the 8th Lingqi layer. In fact, I particularly look forward to seeing how strong and powerful he will be in the future." At that moment, Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi were not arguing anymore. Mr. Hua nodded, smiled, then said, "It's a strike of luck indeed. Lin Feng has only been practicing cultivation for less than a decade. Yet he can already fuse with the earth. He can also defeat cultivators of the Qianqi layer, even though he only had the power of the 8th Lingqi layer. In fact, I particularly look forward to seeing how strong and powerful he will be in the future." "Yes," said Mr. Qi while nodding. Mr. Hua had already told him about all the things which had happened in Celestial River. Lin Feng had been at the core of all these incidents. Lin Feng's natural talent was rare. The so-called geniuses of the biggest sects couldn't rival Lin Feng. Such geniuses as Lin Feng maybe appeared once every millennium. If they didn't die young, they usually reached the heavens. Mr. Qi looked impatient to see an authentic genius grow up. That would indubitably be very exciting. Lin Feng slightly smiled while shaking his head. He indeed had a high natural talent, but for the time being, he wasn't strong enough. There were so many people who were much stronger than him. He needed to be monstrously strong. If someday he managed to reach the heavens and walked above the clouds while looking down at all living creatures, what a mighty and epic moment would that be? Mr. Hua, Mr. Qi, let's refine some Xian-level spirit blood pills together. We'll first start heating the cauldron, said Lin Feng. Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi looked delighted. They both looked forward to concocting some pills all together, the three of them. Refining some Xian-level pills of medium quality was extremely complex. Even though Mr. Qi and Mr. Hua had been arguing, they also didn't really intend to refine Xian-level pills of medium quality. But Lin Feng had opened their eyes, and it was like a ray of sunshine through the clouds. It seemed like nothing was impossible. If Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi had concocted pills, they would only have been able to concoct Xian-level pills of lower quality. But since the earth fusion enabled them to be in symbiosis, the level of the pills could be increased significantly. They were of course willing to give it a try. Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi turned Lin Feng. Is everything ready? Asked Lin Feng. Immediately after, the two old men nodded. Lin Feng closed his eyes and entered in the mysterious dimension which enabled him to fuse with the earth. The strength of his soul emerged and invaded the entire atmosphere. That strength wrapped up the strength of the two old men's souls, and immediately after moved into the cauldron. A fireball appeared and embraced the cauldron, boiling the spiritual herbs which were inside. Fiery herbs, said Mr. Hua, sounding indifferent. Mr. Qi understood what that meant, and then his body faintly shook, and then some pure qi strength moved into the cauldron, breaking apart the fiery herbs and evenly spreading them in the concoction. At that moment, Lin Feng was responsible for making sure that their souls remained on the same wavelength. Mr. Hua was in charge of maintaining the fire while Mr. Qi was in charge of the concoction. Every single step had to be carried out rigorously. The smell of the pills slowly started invading the entire atmosphere. The odor around the cauldron was getting more and more intense. Sanguine flames, said Mr. Hua after a while in a low voice. Mr. Qi had already prepared everything. A long blood-red thread spread in the air and moved into the cauldron. 1,000 lotus leaves, shouted Mr. Hua. Immediately after, 1,000 lotus leaves moved towards the cauldron. The 1,000 lotus leaves couldn't be cooked at the same speed though because of the fire. I will help you, said Mr. Qi in a low voice. His incredibly strong soul came to wrap up the leaves and disperse them evenly and above the fire, enabling them to gradually melt into the sanguine flames. That part was very difficult but was crucial as well. At that moment, Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi were anxiously frowning. They released the entire strength of their souls, which made cold sweat unceasingly drip from their bodies. It was consuming all of their soul strength and pushing them to the limit. At that moment, the lotus leaves were starting to slide to the side. Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi started shaking. Had they failed? At that moment, the great soul which had been wrapping up theirs disappeared as well. In a flash, the wonderful feeling which had invaded their hearts before disappeared. Hopelessness replaced their positive feelings. Their strength wasn't sufficient to refine Xian-level pills of medium quality. They didn't control the strength of their soul with enough mastery. Maybe after breaking through to the 4th Xian-Qi layer, they would be able to achieve their aim. The strength of their souls had already come out of the cauldron. However, at that moment, the strength of a soul kept moving into the cauldron. It wrapped up the 1,000 lotus leaves and put them into the sanguine flames. A bright and resplendent red light emerged in the atmosphere. It almost looked like the lotus leaves were about to blossom. It was splendid. It's Lin Feng, he hasn't given up. Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi's hearts were pounding. They released the strength of their soul once again. One took control of the spiritual herbs and the other took control of the temperature control. After a brief moment, all the spiritual herbs had melted. At that moment, bright red lotus flowers had appeared on the lotus leaves. It was absolutely gorgeous. Close, shouted Mr. Hua. The lotus flowers slowly closed themselves. Immediately after, the fire lost in intensity. The smell of the pills was getting stronger and stronger. A bright and resplendent red light was illuminating the atmosphere and kept revolving above the mouth of the cauldron. "Mr. Qi!" shouted Mr. Hua. He then yelled again. His voice was making the atmosphere vibrate. "Finish the pill!" Boom! A bright and resplendent red light burst from the cauldron. Mr. Qi had anticipated this already. He jumped up in the air, breaking through the ceiling, abruptly raised his hand and grabbed something within the red light. He immediately came back down and opened the palm of his hand. Amazingly, a small oval object appeared. It was illuminated by a red light which kept fluttering around it. "It's finished. It's a success." The three of them suddenly looked truly excited. They had worked together relying on three very strong cultivators' strength. They had all poured endless effort into this process and become closer because of it. It sounded simple, but concocting Xian-level spirit blood pills had sucked up a lot of their energy. Besides, at that moment Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi felt like he was going to collapse. "Mr. Hua, this time Lin Feng is the one who has used the most strength to concoct that Xian-level spirit blood pill. He is also the one who has provided us with the recipe. Finally, at the most crucial moment, he is also the one saved the situation. If he hadn't been there, we wouldn't have been able to refine that spirit blood pill. Therefore it belongs to Lin Feng. What do you think?" said Mr. Qi. They had only prepared the ingredients to concoct the pill. Besides, obtaining one pill was already an exceptional success for them, let alone making more. "I of course have no objection to that. The pill belongs to Lin Feng," said Mr. Hua while smiling and nodding. When Lin Feng heard them, a warm feeling invaded his heart. In the continent, there were many evildoers who constantly plotted against other people, but there were also many people who were very kind and who were honest and sincere to others. Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi belonged to the second category of people. That pill was Xian-level spirit blood pill of medium quality. It would have been incredibly useful to them, particularly if it helped them advance before a potentially fatal battle, but they preferred giving it to Lin Feng. Of course, it was because they were very honest. Besides, Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi were very good friends already and neither would disagree. Lin Feng smiled and shook his head. "Mr. Hua, Mr. Qi. The three of us being together to concoct the pills was absolutely essential. This is the result of our teamwork, and it is a success for us as a group. Nobody has more merit than the other. As far as the pill recipe is concerned, I had already promised it to Mr. Hua, so it doesn't count. Therefore, it is not my recipe and the pill does not belong to me." Lin Feng refused to take the spirit blood pill. If he wanted to kill people, he used his sword. But if people were kind to him, he was happy to make friends with them. "No, in terms of strength, that pill is very beneficial to you," said Mr. Hua while shaking his head. "Mr. Hua, that pill would be very beneficial to me, however it would be better if one of you took it. With my current strength, taking the pill would be a waste. I would not be able to absorb the full power of the pill. It would be better if one of you took it. If you become stronger, that will also help me." Lin Feng once more declined the two old men's offer. Actually, Lin Feng was just stating facts. A cultivator of the Ling Qi layer taking a Xian-level pill of medium quality was a waste. He would not be able to absorb even half of its power. "Mr. Hua, you can take the pill," said Mr. Qi, not trying to convince Lin Feng anymore. Instead, he was giving it to Mr. Hua. But Mr. Hua also shook his head and said, "Old friend, even though you are not as good as me at concocting pills, you are still stronger than me. This pill is for you. It would be more appropriate for you to take it. Stop talking nonsense. Since when am I not as good as you at concocting pills?" said Mr. Qi angrily. "If you're not taking it, you can try to give it to Lin Feng again," said Mr. Hua with a disdainful expression on his face which made Lin Feng smile wryly. How come these two were talking about concocting ability again? "I don't know, but Mr. Hua, Mr. Qi, that pill must be taken as soon as possible for maximum potency. It doesn't matter if you are not interested." When Lin Feng finished talking, he immediately made an eat gesture to them by placing his fingers to his mouth. Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi looked at each other and both immediately burst into a fit of laughter, at the same time. After Lin Feng had left, Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi remained in the room where they were concocting the pills. After Lin Feng had left, Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi remained in the room where they were concocting the pills. Old friend, seriously, you are younger than me. Yet your cultivation level is higher than mine. You are already at the peak of the third Qianqi layer. And your natural talent is extremely high. These spirit blood pills increase the strength of the blood vessels and make the soul much stronger. If you take it, you would have high chance of breaking through to the fourth Qianqi layer. Even in a city as vast as Celestial River, we would still have absolute power. Mr. Hua was looking at Mr. Qi in a solemn and respectful way. Therefore, old friend, we shouldn't fight again. Mr. Qi was a bit surprised. He remained silent for a moment and finally nodded while saying, "All right, old friend, don't be so serious. In the future, with Lin Feng's natural talent and the earth fusion, we will have even more good pills. Do you think that I will not take any in the future?" Huh. Mr. Qi was a bit surprised. He was staring at Mr. Hua and said, "What you mean is?" Mr. Hua slightly nodded and said, "You guessed right, I am getting ready to follow Lin Feng." Follow Lin Feng. Mr. Qi's pupils shrank. Lin Feng had broken through to the 8th Ling Qi layer, but Mr. Hua was a strong cultivator of the 3rd Xian Qi layer. Surprisingly, he wanted to follow Lin Feng. "Indeed, follow Lin Feng," said Mr. Hua, sounding absolutely serious. He then said, sounding solemn and respectful, "Old friend, deep in your heart, you're also able to evaluate Lin Feng's ability to concoct pills." Mr. Qi frowned and then said while nodding, "Earth fusion, that exceptional soul strength and Lin Feng's level of talent. His destiny is to become a great alchemist." "You're wrong, old friend," said Mr. Hua while shaking his head. "I'm wrong. Indeed, you are wrong. His earth fusion, his amazing soul strength, he's not only good for concocting pills. Lin Feng is extremely good at everything. Provided that he's willing to do something, he always manages to master it. He can become a monstrously strong cultivator. He can become an alchemist, a blacksmith, a commander, anything. He only has to be willing to do something and he'll be able to achieve it. If we are patient, we will see incredibly wonderful things happen." Mr. Hua was speaking slowly. Mr. Qi's eyes were twinkling. Indeed, with the earth fusion and his incredible soul strength, Lin Feng would be able to accomplish anything, only relying on his monstrous talent. "Old friend, you have observed Lin Feng's behavior and ability with your own eyes. He is worth trusting. You know, we may be cultivators of the Qianqi layer, but we are not that young anymore. We might not be able to have any more breakthroughs in this lifetime. Our lifespan is not limitless. Nowadays, we have a certain reputation in Celestial River, but it also has its limits and will eventually fade. Following Lin Feng will provide us with many new opportunities." When Mr. Qi heard Mr. Hua, he shivered. Indeed, ordinary people had a life expectancy of 100 years. For people of the Qi and Ling Qi layers, provided that they were strong and healthy, could usually hope to live until 150 years old. Besides, cultivators of the Qianqi layer could to live to the age of 200 years old, but that was the maximum. However, for those who could become amazingly strong cultivators, it was a different story. They could live until the age of 500 years old. Such cultivators could often reach the heavens on the path of cultivation after 300 years. Even though Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi had a prestigious status in Celestial River, but on the scale of the continent they were nobodies. Besides, sooner or later, they would reach their limit, then become weaker, and they wouldn't have the opportunity to improve their cultivation anymore. Following someone strong and making them stronger is easy, but providing help when it is needed the most is difficult. "Old friend, what Lin Feng needs now is assistance. If we follow him, he will be truly grateful. Besides, on the day when Lin Feng reaches the heavens, if you only want to help him become even greater at that moment, will he pay attention to you?" Mr. Hua was speaking slowly. "Old friend, we cannot wait for Lin Feng to become extremely powerful to follow him. Now we have a great opportunity and it will enable us to obtain some power and influence too. We have the opportunity to follow a genius. Isn't that formidable? Besides, if we follow Lin Feng, we might get the chance to become stronger cultivators and not have to worry about our lifespan. Wait for Lin Feng to be influential and then follow him," whispered Mr. Qi. "Could we really become stronger and no longer await our death?" "All right, old friend, take your time to think about it. First, take a spirit blood pill to break through to the next layer. I will help you absorb it," said Mr. Hua, interrupting Mr. Qi's train of thought. Mr. Qi nodded and said, "All right, When they finished talking, the two old men walked to the secret room. A month had passed, and Celestial River was going through some turbulent times. In the western part of Celestial River, there were some of the strongest cultivators of the Haoyu sect. In the northern part, there were some amazingly strong cultivators of the Ice and Snow Mountain Village. Besides, there were even some extremely strong cultivators who had come from other distant places. For example, there were some extremely strong cultivators from the Wuxia sect, the Imperial City, the Wanshou sect, the Yu clan and the Imperial clan. All of these groups of people had sent people to Celestial River. Apart from these people, there were also some unknown people whose influence was unknown. The entire city of Celestial River had been encircled. It was only possible to get into the city, but leaving was impossible. No matter who, they couldn't take half a step outside of the ancient city of Celestial River. Everybody only had one goal: obtain the Heavenly Dragon Cauldron, one of the 10 legendary cauldrons. It was a treasure which dated back to the ancient times, but nobody knew exactly how useful it was. But since it had become one of the 10 legendary cauldrons, it probably was an incredible treasure. That object didn't belong to the history of Shuiyu, but to the history of the continent of the 9 clouds. If some people in the continent knew that one of the 10 legendary cauldrons was in Celestial River, it would turn into a bloodbath. Apart from Shuiyu cultivators, if people other countries learnt that the precious treasure was in Shuiyu, they would also send forces to take it. At that moment in Celestial River, in a thatched hut, there was a silhouette wearing a bamboo hat. That person was wearing ragged clothes and was sitting on the ground. Their head was hanging low. However, an evil light was flashing in the person's eyes. "A bunch of bastards," said that person in an evil voice. The person's eyes were dark green and looked extremely cold. The person was the one who had obtained the Heavenly Dragon Cauldron, Songlan. After everything happened, he hadn't thought that the situation would turn out so difficult. After Songlan obtained the ancient cauldron, his escape had been obstructed by a myriad of people who wanted to kill him. He wanted to rush out of Celestial River, but he had nearly been killed. Later on, more and more strong cultivators had been gathering around the city. Songlan had no possibility of escape. He was completely encircled. At that moment he was severely injured. Even though he had been injured, he had also killed a certain number of his pursuers. These days, Songlan was like a beggar who nobody wanted to be associated with. He was chased by a myriad of people who wanted to kill him. He was under extreme pressure. Songlan was breathing heavily. Pure chi was revolving around his body. His chi was unstable. During that short time he swallowed an incredible quantity of pure chi, but horrible things were progressively approaching him. It seemed like oblivion was awaiting. At that moment Songlan frowned. An evil expression flashed in his eyes. In the distance, some people were moving towards him. "Sister, there is a thatched hut there, let's go and rest there," said a girl. Immediately after, everybody started walking towards the hut. Songlan was in corner. He was dispirited. A short moment after, 3 beautiful silhouettes entered the thatched hut. "Sister, look. There's somebody here. Let's switch to another place," said the younger girl in a soft voice. "Why would we? Let's make him get the hell out of here," said the other one aggressively. Immediately after, she arrived on Songlan's side and said, sounding ice cold, "We belong to the Wuxia sect and need to have a rest. Leave and find another place to stay." "Switch to another place?" said Songlan with a strange expression on his face. He slowly raised his head. His face was filled with an evil expression which made the 3 people shiver. Their facial expressions drastically changed. Slash slash. Several vines appeared in the air in a flash. The girl's body was constricted by the vines, which were sucking the blood and flesh from under her skin. "Ah!" A horrible shriek spread in the air. The 2 other people started running away, but in a flash, another vine moved towards one of the girls and firmly wrapped around her body. "Don't kill me!" desperately shouted that girl. Immediately after, her body turned into a pile of skin and bones which hit the floor. 2 girls had already been killed. From the 3 girls there was only one left. "Songlan, surprisingly you're here," said a cold voice. Immediately after, the thatched hut was completely frozen. Songlan was shivering, he was unable to deal with the younger girl. Boom! An ice chi rushed into the thatched hut and Songlan immediately tried to leave. Songlan, I've been chasing you for such a long time. You already want to escape? Said that ice-cold voice. Bing! Tongue! When the young girl heard these incredibly evil shouts, she immediately sat down onto the ground. When she saw her two sisters' corpses, her body started shaking in grief. At that moment, a person entered the now empty thatched hut. The young girl slightly calmed down. She raised her head and looked at the silhouette who had just entered the thatched hut. That person was wearing a monstrous bronze mask. The girl was so terrified that her hands dug into the ground. She kept crawling backwards. The pair of eyes behind the bronze mask looked swift and fierce, ice-cold, but they didn't look at the young girl at all, as if the person was lost in thoughts. Songlan and Bing Hetung are here surprisingly. Besides, it seems like Songlan still has the heavenly dragon cauldron. Bing Hetung has been chasing him. Thought Ba Dao. That thatched hut wasn't far from the place where Lin Feng and him were staying. Mr. Hua's residence was very close to this place. He was walking near the thatched hut and had sensed the cold qi. He quickly approached and then he had immediately heard Songlan shout Bing Hetung's name. In the distance, another voice spread in the atmosphere which surprised Ba Dao and made him shiver. He jumped away, he didn't feel like creating more trouble. Stay there, said an ice-cold voice. At the moment when Ba Dao was getting ready to leave the thatched hut, a violent energy oppressed his body. Then someone punched through the air and the energy transformed into a blade which bombarded the atmosphere. Extremely loud explosion sounds spread through the atmosphere. The thatch was already wrecked. Ba Dao's body was completely oppressed and fell down onto the ground. There was a man in front of him who glanced at Ba Dao. It was a young man. Immediately after, he looked at the two corpses as well as the young girl sitting on the ground. Your methods are cruel and evil, said the young man sounding ice-cold while releasing deadly qi. I didn't kill them, said Ba Dao sounding cold and detached, but his interlocutor didn't pay attention to him, and his deadly qi was becoming even denser. Do you think that I would believe you? Said the young man sounding ice-cold. You kill my two sister disciples and want to do evil things to my other sister disciple. I caught you red-handed and now you want to escape? He didn't kill them, said the girl sitting on the ground while standing up. She looked at the young man in an ice-cold way. Fellow disciples? A moment ago, her brother disciple was near the thatched hut. He should have noticed that her two sisters being killed, but at the moment when they shouted for help, he did not come to help. He had just arrived after Ba Dao entered the hut. That was her brother disciple, how ridiculous. The young man couldn't deal with the murderer, so he wanted to use Ba Dao as a scapegoat. Sister, don't worry, since I am here, you don't need to be afraid of being bullied. Besides, I will avenge our two sisters. Just as the young girl had guessed, that young man really wanted to make Ba Dao a scapegoat. If he and his sister came out safe and sound while the two others had been killed, how would he be able to explain why he hadn't stopped the murderer? Wouldn't he lose face? Ba Dao frowned. That young girl guessed right, that young man intended to make him as a scapegoat. Was it that easy though? Since you want to kill him, what can I do? But I know that he hasn't killed them, said the young girl looking disgusted. You don't know how to differentiate good from bad, said the young man. His facial expression looked strict and rigid. He then added, if you had been raped and killed by him, isn't revenge important? Wu Gang, you're really shameless. That young girl looked slightly pale and her face was distorted. At the same time, Ba Dao realized what was going on as well. That guy wanted to kill him. Yunxi, you are so naive. You're not prepared to accept some things, but I like you that way, you're so innocent. Unfortunately, the only thing we can have is a one-night stand. You are not wife material, said Wu Gang while smiling coldly. He had always been interested in Yunxi, but she had never been interested in him. Proud and ambitious as he was uncomfortable not getting what he wanted. However, he now had the opportunity to make his evil thoughts come to reality at that moment. When Yunxi heard Wu Gang, her face turned deathly pale. He was really shameless. Sister, don't worry, I will kill him first and then I will take care of you, said Wu Gang while smiling. Immediately after, he looked at Ba Dao in an ice-cold way. His eyes were filled with murderous intentions. Ba Dao remained silent. A light flashed and his moonbreaking blade appeared in his hand. A piercingly cold and extremely brutal energy emerged from the blade. You're not weak, 7th Ling Qi layer, and your weapon is a spiritual weapon of higher quality. However, as before, you have run into a dead end, said Wu Gang while smiling coldly. He was one of the most outstanding disciples of the Wuxia sect. He had broken through to the 9th Ling Qi layer. His silhouette flickered and he then took a huge step. An illusion on his side transformed into opaque rosy clouds which filled the atmosphere. It was endless, mysterious and unfathomable. It was the sunset cloud's skill. Slash! Shouted Ba Dao. Ba Dao's blade lacerated the air. It seemed like the atmosphere was being torn apart. After that, his blade fell down onto the opponent's attack. It seemed like the atmosphere was torn apart. After that, that blade lacerated the endless and mysterious energy. It felt like that blade was easily cutting through the energy like his blade was cutting air. The sunset cloud's skill was a D-level skill. Sunset clouds emerged from the cultivator's palm. It was vast and boundless but very difficult to carry out. However, in case of success, it was a terrifying attack. Boom! The enemy's hand landed on Ba Dao's body, which made him groan in pain, and his body was projected backwards. That cultivator had broken through to the 9th Ling Qi layer and was close to the Xian Qi layer. He could already control a meager amount of pure qi and was difficult to fight against. In Shuiyu, the Wuxia sect doesn't have the greatest influence, but if anyone dares look down on my sect, except for the 8 high officials of Shuiyu, no matter who it is, I despise them. No need to say that it especially applies to such worthless and insignificant people such as you, said Wu Gang, sounding arrogant. He was looking at Yuan Shi while talking as if he had been talking to her, but she didn't care about him at all. How ridiculous! Is that so? Said a voice which echoed through the atmosphere. It was extremely distinct, yet nobody was visible. Wu Gang frowned and said coldly, "Show yourself." Ba Dao was smiling. Except for the 8 high officials, Wu Gang despised everybody else? Very quickly, Wu Gang was going to realize that he was a fool. You dare say such arrogant things, and now you don't even know the location of the person you are speaking down to. How ridiculous! Said Ba Dao coldly when he saw that Wu Gang looked so arrogant. Shut the hell up. It's probably a shameless liar just like you, just another shameless person, said Wu Gang, sounding cold and detached, but when finished talking his heart twitched. He abruptly turned his head around and a distorted expression appeared on his face. Someone had been standing directly behind him. That person had appeared in absolute silence. That person looked clear and had limpid eyes. That person was a bit younger than Wu Gang. He looked handsome as well. His face didn't contain the least bit of shamelessness. Who are you? Asked Wu Gang to Lin Feng coldly. He didn't recognize Lin Feng. Lin Feng gave a mysterious impression to Wu Gang. Lin Feng looked indifferent and carefree like a gentle breeze, as if Lin Feng was just an illusion on the wind. You despise everyone who looks down on your sect except for the 8 high officials. Since it's like that, there is no need to tell you anything. The only thing that you need to know is that we are enemies, that's enough. Lin Feng was smiling. A moment before, Wu Gang had said it himself, except for the 8 high officials, he despised everybody else. Even though I, Wu Gang, am very proud, is not willing to make an enemy of others without reason. If there is the possibility, I prefer making friends, said Wu Gang. Wu Gang couldn't sense Lin Feng's presence, so he was feeling unsafe. How shameless! Cursed Yuan Shi. Wu Gang was really shameless. She felt disgusted by him. He is my friend. You wanted to kill him a moment ago. Are we friends or enemies, you tell me? Said Lin Feng while smiling coldly and pointing at Ba Dao. Wu Gang enjoyed using his power to bully those weaker than him. Well, Lin Feng could do the same. I'm giving you face, don't be shameless. I am the second best core disciple of the Wuxia sect. What do you intend to do, acting so arrogantly in front of me? Wu Gang couldn't reply to Lin Feng's question, so he immediately became aggressive and announced his status. After mentioning the Wuxia sect, Lin Feng would definitely be afraid. I'm so scared, said Lin Feng while smiling coldly. His silhouette flickered and he disappeared from his original position. When Lin Feng reappeared, he was within arm's reach of Wu Gang. Die! Furiously shouted Wu Gang. His sunset clouds attack appeared again. The atmosphere was illuminated by rosy clouds. It looked incredible. The attack was just as opaque and unfathomable as before. However, the endless rosy clouds were extremely distinct for Lin Feng, who was in fusion with the earth. He shook his finger out of which sword energies emerged and whistled in the air. He immediately attacked Wu Gang with his finger. Ah! A horrible shriek spread in the atmosphere. Wu Gang's body was projected back of 10 meters. His facial expression looked glum. At that moment in the middle of his palm blood was pouring down. A moment before, Lin Feng's sword-like finger had immediately pierced the palm of his hand. What a terrifying sharpness! Except for the 8 high officials, you despise everybody else as expected. You are a real genius, said Lin Feng while laughing disdainfully on the tone of a joke. When Yunxi saw that Lin Feng had defeated Wu Gang's sunset cloud so easily, and had even injured him, her beautiful eyes started twinkling. How strong! When Yunxi saw that Lin Feng had defeated Wu Gang's sunset cloud so easily, and had even injured him, her beautiful eyes started twinkling. How strong! Who the hell are you? Wu Gang's palm was bleeding. He was evilly staring at Lin Feng. To which sect did Lin Feng belong? Why had he never heard about him before? Even though he had just said that, except for the 8 high officials, he despised everybody, he was just exaggerating. His ego had made him say those words. But the disciples of the other sects who could rival him were actually very few. He was well aware that they were completely different from the person who was standing before him. You are Lin Feng? At that moment Yunxi asked in a low voice. Lin Feng's name was already famous in Celestial River. He was carefree and ruthless. He was 18 years old but had defeated Bing Yuan, the Blade Elder Long Yu, and he had even killed 4 cultivators of the Xianqi layer. At the Wuxia sect, many disciples were talking about Lin Feng. Yunxi had already heard about him a few times, trying to imagine what Lin Feng looked like. She had imagined that Lin Feng was arrogant and rude, but the young man who was standing there in front of her looked handsome and delicate. However, his proud temperament reminded her of the rumors surrounding Lin Feng. Lin Feng looked at Yunxi and smiled. He looked handsome. He slightly nodded at her. Lin Feng's smile made Yunxi's heartbeat accelerate. He nodded. It's really Lin Feng. Since ancient times, beautiful women liked heroic men. At the Wuxia sect, many girls wanted to see Lin Feng, that powerful and elegant young man. At that moment, Lin Feng's smile had the same effect as a gentle breeze on Yunxi's body. In comparison with Lin Feng, Wu Gang looked extremely ugly. He was far from being able to rival Lin Feng in looks. Lin Feng. Wu Gang was stupefied. When he heard that name, he suddenly looked terrified. Lin Feng was able to kill cultivators of the Xianqi layer. Besides, he had killed Bing Yuan of the Ice and Snow Mountain village. Therefore, Lin Feng wouldn't hesitate for a moment when killing him, who belonged to the Wuxia sect. Lin Feng, there is a misunderstanding, said Wu Gang while smiling warmly. He suddenly forgot that he wanted to kill Lin Feng a moment before. His hand was even still bleeding from the wound. A misunderstanding? Said Lin Feng with a cold smile on the corner of his mouth. Ba Dao, is there a misunderstanding? He and the girls belonged to the Wuxia sect. Emotsong Lan killed the 2 other girls. He perfectly knows about that. Because he cannot defeat Emotsong Lan, he used me as a scapegoat. Besides, from his previous words it is clear that he was definitely planning to rape and kill the remaining girl, and then accuse me of doing it. He perfectly knew everything from the beginning. There is no misunderstanding. Ba Dao's voice sounded ice-cold, which made Wu Gang's facial expression turn glum. It is really a misunderstanding. I didn't know that you were Lin Feng's friend. Continued Wu Gang while smiling. So what? You don't think that it is shameful to come and use someone else's scapegoat? Now I feel like killing you, and that means I will kill you, said Lin Feng while smiling coldly. He then started walking slowly, which made Wu Gang's smile turn rigid. Lin Feng, nothing has to be set in stone. You can give me some conditions to live. Besides, my sister disciple Yunxi is pure and fresh. If you like her, you can play with her as you wish. What do you think? Wu Gang was slowly stepping backwards. He didn't want to fight. His courage had already been crushed. He now knew Lin Feng's identity. He didn't dare to fight anymore. You're so shameless, said Lin Feng, whose silhouette flickered just like an illusion. At that moment, Wu Gang's hand shook as well. An incredible quantity of poisonous qi invaded the atmosphere, which surprised Lin Feng, who immediately stopped. His raised his hand and the poisonous qi immediately dispersed. However, at that moment, Wu Gang suddenly grabbed Yunxi and was staring at Lin Feng. Lin Feng, look at my sister disciple, she is so fresh and pure. Besides, she likes you. Wouldn't it be a waste if she died? Lin Feng was surprised. He hadn't thought that he was that kind of person. He had taken Yunxi as a hostage to threaten Lin Feng. What did he intend to do? Yunxi was also his fellow disciple. She wasn't Lin Feng's friend. However, Wu Gang was taking her as a hostage. Lin Feng was really startled. Yunxi hadn't thought that Wu Gang would do such a thing either. What Wu Gang was doing was utterly illogical. However, Yunxi was looking at Lin Feng with pleading eyes. She had already seen Mo Tsonglan kill her two sister disciples, and then the ugly Wu Gang had shown himself. She felt hopeless, lonely, and desperate. She wished someone would show her some sympathy and consideration. The daring young hero whom she had wished would come and save her had appeared. Besides, he was very handsome. That was like a ray of light in her heart. She had a strange sensation, though, as if she had been floating through the air. She had the impression that her heart had become vast and boundless. Taking advantage of a woman who was lost in her heart was extremely easy. How shameless, said Lin Feng coldly while looking at Wu Gang. So what? Lin Feng, surely you can't stand seeing such a pure and beautiful flower fade? Look how delicate her skin is. She's just turned 17, said Wu Gang, who ignored Lin Feng's words. He just kept talking. An ice-cold-looking blade suddenly pressed against Yunxi's face. When Lin Feng saw the girl's pure and beautiful eyes, he felt like he couldn't leave her and had to do something, even though he didn't even know her. Hehe. The power of a woman's beauty is impressive. Sister, don't you always talk about Lin Feng? Now it seems that Lin Feng is also interested in you. Look how good he is to you. Seems like you two are a perfect match, said Wu Gang while slowly pulling back Yunxi. Yunxi had mixed feelings. Wu Gang was her fellow disciple and acted so shamelessly and evil. Wu Gang was using her life to threaten a stranger. Lin Feng and her didn't know each other. But Lin Feng wasn't going to attack Wu Gang to save her. She was in a difficult position. Far away in the distance, some silhouettes were moving towards the hut. When Lin Feng saw that there were some silhouettes flying through the sky, he frowned. Besides, Wu Gang looked delighted. His dagger suddenly disappeared. He kept dragging Yunxi backwards. He shouted loudly, "The elders have arrived at the perfect time. Someone wants to kill us, the disciples of the Wuxia sect." These people who were coming precisely belonged to the Wuxia sect. In a flash, they arrived on Wu Gang's side. "Wu Gang, what's going on?" asked that person coldly while glancing at the corpses on the ground. "Elder Lin Feng is a criminal and attacked me by surprise. He also killed some of our disciples. He also planned to rape Yunxi, my fellow disciple. Luckily, I risked my life to protect her, preventing Lin Feng from attacking. I am lucky that you arrived at the critical moment," said Wu Gang, which made the people of the Wuxia sect coldly stare at Lin Feng. "Elder, Wu Gang is shameless. The one who killed my two fellow disciples was someone else. Besides, the one who wanted to rape me is Wu Gang. He just took a dagger and put it against my face, threatening Lin Feng," said Yunxi honestly. Wu Gang was way too shameless in trying to accuse others. "Sister, I took you to threaten Lin Feng? What is the nature of your relationship with Lin Feng? I know that Lin Feng's words made you confused, but in front of the elders, you don't need to lie," said Wu Gang coldly. Yunxi's face turned deathly pale. She was speechless. "Yunxi, stop causing trouble," said the great elder, sounding indifferent. Yunxi was astonished. She looked at him and said, "You don't believe me either. It's the truth, it was really Wu Gang who did all these things." "All right, shut up now," shouted the great elder. Yunxi started shaking when she heard him. Besides, an indifferent smile appeared on Wu Gang's face at the same time. What a naive girl. Wu Gang was the genius of the Wuxia sect. He had been trained for many years in the sect. The elder had obviously witnessed what had happened but was turning a blind eye to the truth. Besides, she wasn't that important in the sect when compared with Wu Gang. Besides, elders we all seniors, they didn't need to know any of the details. If there was a problem, they would always take Wu Gang's side and protect him. The great elder looked at Lin Feng with an ice-cold glare. Lin Feng, how audacious! You dared kill members of the Wuxia sect, said another elder coldly. Immediately after, several silhouettes flickered and the members of the Wuxia sect encircled Lin Feng. When Lin Feng saw these people, a cold expression appeared in his eyes. A moment before, Wu Gang had used him as a scapegoat, and now these people, because of Wu Gang's lies, wanted to kill him too? Lin Feng understood things much better than Yunxi. How could he not understand the morally corrupt actions of these people? Nonetheless, was killing Lin Feng really that easy? Elders, you must all stop immediately, said Yunxi while looking at the elders surrounding Lin Feng. She looked nervous and yelled, "This really has nothing to do with Lin Feng. How can you all be so unfair? Elders, you must all stop immediately," said Yunxi while looking at the elders surrounding Lin Feng. She looked nervous and yelled, "This really has nothing to do with Lin Feng. How can you all be so unfair? Shut up." Yunxi's body flew away and crashed into the ground. She raised her head and saw that she was struck by her own master. She felt extremely cold in her heart, cold to the extent that it was piercing to the bones. She devoted her life to the sect, rarely leaving it to the extent that it had almost become her permanent home. She had little experience in the real world, therefore, there were many things which she didn't understand. In her heart, she had always had the feeling that the sect was a place where she would always be safe. But at that moment, her heart had been invaded with bitter feelings. She had just seen the true face of her sect. She had seen the coldness and cruelty of these people. That coldness was enough to make her feel hopeless. At that moment, Yunxi's world had been crushed. The sect was no longer the same in her heart. She wasn't seeing any of the warmth, only desolate coldness. When she saw her master's cold and indifferent expression, she finally realized that that world wasn't as simple and pure as she thought. The people of the Wuxia sect weren't as kind and caring as she thought. A single teardrop slowly ran down her cheek. It was a tear of hopelessness. She had also realized that no matter what she said, no matter how loud she shouted, nobody would pay attention to her. When Lin Feng saw Yunxi's teardrop, he sighed. Yunxi was way too naive. She had never understood that there were evil people running her sect. That was the hypocrisy of the world. It wasn't about who was in the right or wrong. It was more about understanding the other party's real objective. "Sister, because of a stranger you're now suffering, and you surprisingly dared humiliate an elder in front of everybody," said Wu Gang indifferently. Yunxi looked at him in an ice-cold way. Everything was happening because of Wu Gang. He was such a disgusting person, but Wu Gang didn't care about her opinion. Wu Gang was just thinking that it would be a pity if he didn't have the opportunity to play with such a beautiful girl. "Elders, Lin Feng is a shameless enemy. Not only did he attack me by surprise, but he has also killed 2 of our disciples and fooled Yunxi. He is a worthless and disgusting animal. He must die." Wu Gang turned around and smiled coldly. His face was filled with murderous intentions. "Indeed. That disgusting person must die. We must avenge our disciples," said another elder immediately. "Kill him. We'll definitely kill him," said all the elders consecutively, as if they were judges giving Lin Feng the death sentence. In their eyes, Lin Feng's life was already in their hands. If they wanted to kill him, they could kill him. Amongst these elders of the Wuxia sect, 3 of them were at the first Xianqi layer, 2 at the second Xianqi layer, and 1 at the third Xianqi layer. In such circumstances, Lin Feng was unable to escape even if he grew wings. Extremely swift and fierce sword qi emerged and bombarded the atmosphere. At that moment, A purple light shot high into the sky above Lin Feng's head, making him look like a ferocious warrior. What? He wants to fight? The members of the Wuxia sect laughed coldly and joked. He is a cultivator of the Ling Qi layer. Even if he relies on external factors to increase his cultivation abilities, how could he resist our elders? Yes, he just wants to die. A gigantic qi emerged in the atmosphere. The cultivators of the Ling Qi layer all moved back, and only those of the Xian Qi layer continued surrounding Lin Feng. They had all heard about that day when Lin Feng had fought against the Dream Pavilion, and that he had killed 4 cultivators of the Xian Qi layer. Even though they had only broken through to the first Xian Qi layer, they had probably been careless when dealing with him. At that moment, all the elders were surrounding Lin Feng. How could he resist? You still want to kill him? Does that mean that you don't believe me? Said Yunxi in a quiet voice. Was it that they didn't believe her or that they chose to ignore her? They all knew the truth perfectly, but it was much easier for them to just kill Lin Feng and settle the matter. Yunxi stood up and said to the elders, "Elders, I swear that my 2 fellow disciples were killed by an evil man whom we met when we went into the hut. He also wanted to kill me, but at that moment someone whose name apparently was Bing Hetong appeared, and then the man stopped paying attention to me. Then they both left." Wu Gang perfectly knows what happened, but he doesn't want to lose face. He wanted to find a scapegoat. He was planning to rape me and kill me, then blame the one in the bronze mask. Fortunately, Lin Feng appeared, but Wu Gang shamelessly captured me as a hostage and threatened Lin Feng, which is why Lin Feng didn't kill him. After that, all of you arrived. I would prefer death over living a lie. What a naive little girl. How foolish. All these people of the Wuxia sect were coldly staring at Yunxi. Get lost, shouted a powerful voice that filled everyone's ears. It made Yunxi's entire body shake. If you try to prevent us from avenging our sect members, we will bury you here with them, shouted an incredibly aggressive voice which made Yunxi's heart pound faster. She had lost all hope. It seemed like everything she had done had been useless. No problem, kill me too, said Yunxi. At that moment a smile appeared on her face, a smile of agony. Suddenly, a deadly qi emerged from her body. Everybody was surprised. It doesn't look good, cried Lin Feng in alarm. His body flickered and he appeared behind Yunxi's body. It was already too late though. Yunxi groaned. She slammed the deadly qi into her chest and blood gushed from her mouth. A flower, which had yet to blossom, had already withered. Lin Feng caught Yunxi's body and his face turned deathly pale. Yunxi killed herself. Surprisingly, she took her own life. How foolish, what a naive young girl. She was so young, she was only 17 years old. She was supposed to be experiencing the most beautiful years of her life. However, because she had discovered how bitter reality really was, she couldn't stand it and killed herself. It shouldn't have ended that way. The members of the Wuxia sect were astonished. Yunxi's suicide was unexpected. However, they were only surprised for a few seconds and cold expressions quickly reappeared on their faces again. In their opinion, her death was insignificant. She had died, so what? Yunxi's body softly collapsed into Lin Feng's chest. Her head was raised. Blood was flowing out of her little mouth. Her naive young eyes were looking at Lin Feng and she was still smiling. I'm sorry. I didn't have the chance to fight for you. All of this happened because of me. Lin Feng was wiping the blood from her mouth with the greatest care. He was unceasingly shaking his head. When Lin Feng looked at her deathly pale smile, he could see that she was very beautiful and soft-hearted. Unfortunately, the flower had chosen to wither over blossoming into a cruel world. I know that it is not because they don't believe me, it is that they disdain my words. I couldn't convince them. Therefore death was the only solution. Yunxi's voice gradually lost in intensity. Lin Feng raised his head and felt like he was going to cry. He wasn't like Yunxi, he wasn't naive. He was convinced that his efforts would bring him good luck. However, he had already experienced the bitterness of the cruelty of people in his past life. Lin Feng, I'm already a young woman and I have no one to love. Please grant me my first kiss, said Yunxi suddenly with a shy smile. Immediately after, she added, just consider this as the last wish of a fellow cultivator. All right, said Lin Feng while solemnly nodding. How could he refuse the last request of such a young and naive girl? He slightly lowered his head and wiped away the blood as he softly kissed her warm lips. She looked beautiful and resplendent. So that's what it feels like to kiss someone. Yunqi's face slightly turned red. Immediately after, her beautiful naive eyes slowly closed. When Lin Feng saw her close her eyes, he raised his head while looking to the sky to stop his tears and took a deep agonizing breath. Kill! 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 Lin Feng was shouting these words. His voice was extremely loud and filled with fury. In the air, 3 silhouettes appeared and rushed towards him. An incredibly strong and powerful ice-cold qi suddenly emerged in the atmosphere, enveloping everybody. The powerful qi made the ground vibrate. That purple light was Lin Feng's signal for Mr. Hua, Mr. Qi, as well as Meng Qing. They had all seen the purple light and rushed to that location. It was just that they hadn't shown themselves until now. When the people of the Wuxia sect sensed the terrifying energies, their hearts started pounding. What a terrifying qi! The people of the Wuxia sect were looking at the 3 people who had just landed next to Lin Feng, which made them shake from head to toe. What a terrifying qi! The people of the Wuxia sect were looking at the 3 people who had just landed next to Lin Feng, which made them shake from head to toe. They had heard that 2 strong cultivators stood on Lin Feng's side. There was the old man Mr. Hua and a delicate-looking girl whose face was covered with a fine veil. But at that moment there was one more person. Mr. Qi, and besides, Mr. Qi's qi was terrifying. Mr. Qi, Mr. Hua, kill them, all of them. Lin Feng's qi was getting even more brutal. Mr. Qi and Mr. Hua slightly nodded. Their terrifying qi was getting more and more powerful. Especially the qi from Mr. Qi. The strength of the qi that he was releasing already exceeded that of the 3rd Xian qi layer. 4th Xian qi layer. The elders of the Wuxia sect were suddenly feeling uneasy. They were furious. On Lin Feng's side, there was another powerful cultivator. He was even stronger than Mr. Hua and the girl. He had broken through to the 4th Xian qi layer. At the scale of the Xian qi layer, 1 layer already constituted a huge difference. How foolish! Hideous facial expressions appeared on all these people's faces. They wanted to kill Lin Feng? At this moment they were the ones in danger. Lin Feng. She still has 1 breath left in her body. I will give her a pill. A miracle could still happen, said Mr. Hua while putting a pill in Yunqi's mouth. Immediately after, the strength of the pure qi spread through her body and his finger pressed between her eyebrows. Lin Feng was stupefied. He could sense it. He was dumbstruck. Indeed, Yunqi still had a breath in her lungs. She was extremely weak. A moment ago, Lin Feng's heart had been filled with so much hatred and murderous intentions that he hadn't noticed it. Mr. Hua, said Lin Feng, whose eyes were filled with hope. A small light appeared between her eyebrows. It was pulsating. Then Mr. Hua took his finger off her head and looked at Lin Feng. She will not die within the next 7 days, but the blood vessels are completely destroyed. She's severely injured. She will not live past 7 days. Lin Feng was dumbstruck and hastily replied, Is there no solution? There is one, said Mr. Hua. He then remained silent for a moment and said, while frowning, But only monstrously powerful pills can save her life. Pills? Lights were flashing in Lin Feng's eyes. Immediately after, he handed Yunqi over to Meng Qing and said, Meng Qing, take care of her. Meng Qing looked at Lin Feng. She was surprised, but immediately after she nodded and took Yunqi in her arms. After that, Lin Feng handed Yunqi over to Meng Qing. He turned around and stared at Wu Gang. His terrifying deadly qi turned into a sword which immediately rushed towards Wu Gang. Wu Gang couldn't help but move backwards. His face turned deathly pale. He was terrified of Lin Feng. Lin Feng looked frightening. His deadly qi was monstrous in power. If I don't kill you, it means that justice doesn't exist, said Lin Feng as his voice filled with killing intent. He then said, Mr. Qi, Mr. Hua, kill them all. Sorry for the trouble. It's been a while since I last fought. I still haven't enjoyed a good fight since I broke through to the 4th Xian qi layer, said Mr. Qi while smiling. His silhouette flickered and in a flash he disappeared. Ah! In a flash, a horrible shriek spread in the atmosphere. Mr. Chi's palm immediately crashed into an elder's body. Immediately, that elder's chest started burning and a black mark appeared. That elder was at the first Xianqi layer. He had just died. The difference between a cultivator of the first Xianqi layer and the fourth Xianqi layer was enormous. There was a difference of 3 layers. It was a gigantic gap. The strength between layers was even more vast than the Lingqi layer. In a flash, the elder was killed. The elders of the Luoxia sect were all incomparably pale. They were all cultivators of the Xianqi layer, they were all treasures in their sect, but at that moment they could easily get killed at any moment. Besides, there was one thing that scared them. A moment ago, Mr. Chi had killed a cultivator of the Xianqi layer in one strike. Well, what about them? A sensation of danger invaded their hearts. Maybe they made a mistake on that day. Everybody, act together and defeat the enemies, said the leader of the elders, who was the one at the third Xianqi layer. But when he finished talking, a terrifying fireball appeared. Mr. Hua was attacking him. Old friend, I'll keep this one under control, you kill the others. I will see how much time you need, said Mr. Hua. He was going to fight against the cultivator of the third Xianqi layer. The other ones had only broken through to the first and second Xianqi layer. Mr. Chi would easily kill them all. He wouldn't need much time to deal with them. All right. Mr. Chi nodded and took a huge step. An insanely violent pure chi started spinning around his body, which made everybody's heartbeat accelerate. What a monstrous ability! Mr. Hua was going to take care of the elder at the third Xianqi layer, so how would the others resist Mr. Chi without him? They had absolutely no hope. They would never be able to resist the power without the support of a stronger cultivator. At that moment, Mr. Chi was moving towards a cultivator of the first Xianqi layer. That person didn't even try to release his chi. He immediately tried to run away. However, how could a cultivator at the first Xianqi layer be faster than one of the fourth Xianqi layer? In a flash, a monstrous force descended from the sky. He abruptly turned his head around and immediately saw a brutal attack crash into him. Another cultivator of the Xianqi layer had just died. Dread was invading their hearts at that moment. The cultivator of the fourth Xianqi layer was way too terrifying. Their hearts were filled with regret. They regretted siding with Wu Gang and trying to kill Lin Feng, while letting Yun Shi die. Now, not only would they not have the power to kill Lin Feng, but instead Lin Feng was repaying their hostility several times over. Wu Gang bastard cursed the members of the Luoxia sect at that moment. That bastard had provoked Lin Feng, and the consequences would be terrifying. They could all possibly die today because of it. At that moment, a purple light was furiously circling Lin Feng's body. At the same time, a terrifying sword energy rose into the air, and then rushed towards Wu Gang. Wu Gang's heart was pounding violently. Lin Feng was terrifying, he looked like a death god. In a flash, the purple energy wrapped around a person in front of Wu Gang. The purple energy lifted the person into the air. His legs were frenetically moving above the ground, but he was unable to escape. Lin Feng's hand was rushing through the air. The sword energy burst forth and a blood mark appeared between that person's eyebrows. It looked like a sword had pierced through his head. Run, run! The other disciples were panic-stricken. They didn't want to fight at all. The elders at the Xianqi layer were being slaughtered by Mr. Chi besides. None of the disciples could fight against Lin Feng. If they couldn't escape, the only possibility was to die. It was a dead end for them. Escape. Lin Feng's deadly chi became even more violent. His mouth looked distorted for a moment, and then several hundred purple snakes appeared, which threw themselves at the escaping enemies, wrapping their bodies around the escaping disciples. At that moment, in the air, a few silhouettes were violently struggling. Everybody will die. Lin Feng's voice sounded ice-cold to the extent that it was piercing through to the bones. He raised both his hands high up into the air and a sword appeared. It was made of pure chi. It looked like the sword of a war god. That sword was filled with deadly chi, sword chi, and battle energy. Besides, it was gigantic. Lin Feng slowly rose into the air. His sword was dazzling and it suddenly shot through the air like a meteor. The entire atmosphere was consumed by a rain of blood as the sword slashed down. One sword made of chi was enough to kill all of them. There wasn't a single disciple left alive. Battle noises were unceasingly spreading through the atmosphere. Wu Gang was looking at the corpses unceasingly falling onto the ground. His heart was violently pounding, and it was getting worse each time a new corpse hit the floor. Everybody had died. Only one person was left. Lin Feng. He had meticulously killed everybody. Wu Gang raised his head and looked at Lin Feng's face. It was filled with killing intent. Fear invaded Wu Gang's entire soul. He was hopeless and terrified. "Don't kill me. I know that I was wrong," said Wu Gang while frantically shaking his hand. He finally regretted that he tried to put the blame on Lin Feng. He had invited the fury of a god of death. The arrogance had disappeared from his face. He also didn't have his evil smile anymore. Instead, there was only fear on his face. Everybody had died. All the elders of the Xian Qi layer had died. Those of the Ling Qi layer had all been slaughtered under Lin Feng's sword made of qi. "You know that you are wrong?" said Lin Feng while smiling coldly. "Was admitting that he was at fault enough? Didn't you say that I attacked you by surprise? Now I will give you the chance to attack me," said Lin Feng, sounding cold and detached. After seeing such a slaughter, how could Wu Gang still dare to fight? His body flickered and he immediately tried to escape. After that, when Wu Gang's body was in mid-air, a purple snake immediately wrapped around him and brought him back. He appeared in front of Lin Feng, who raised his head and saw Wu Gang tied up. "You want to run away?" said Lin Feng while smiling coldly. He raised his sword. A horrible shriek spread through the air. Wu Gang's legs were both cut off to stop him running away. Wu Gang's body was tied up by the purple snake. Lin Feng had just cut off both of his legs to stop him from running. Blood was unceasingly flowing. Wu Gang's body was violently shaking. His eyes were filled with agony. Wu Gang's body was tied up by the purple snake. Lin Feng had just cut off both of his legs to stop him from running. Blood was unceasingly flowing. Wu Gang's body was violently shaking. His eyes were filled with agony. "That was for your shameless and cowardly actions," said Lin Feng, sounding cold. His sword glowed again and another agonizing scream spread through the atmosphere. Wu Gang's left arm was cut off. The pain was so extreme for Wu Gang that he even started to cry. The endless pain made him hate himself. He regret so much. Why had he infuriated a monster? What he had done wasn't much different from self-destruction. All that endless pain and agony was because he provoked Lin Feng. "That was because you humiliated me," said Lin Feng, sounding indifferent. He looked expressionless and emotionless. "Then the last one will be for Yun Shi." A light streaked through the air and Wu Gang's last arm was cut off as well. Immediately after, the snake let go of Wu Gang's body, which immediately fell down onto the ground while wailing. "You are shameless, cowardly, and vicious. I will be even more vicious than you would be to your opponent, so I will not kill you. I will let you suffer a life not worth living," said Lin Feng coldly. Immediately after, the purple snakes vanished and Lin Feng slowly turned around. "Oh!" Another horrible shriek emerged into the atmosphere. The last cultivator of the third Xian Qi layer had just been killed by Mr. Qi and Mr. Hua. All the members of the Wuxia sect that were in Celestial River had died. A group of strong cultivators with quite a few talents had come to Celestial River to steal the heavenly dragon cauldron. However, they hadn't obtained the treasure and instead met an early death. The only one left was Wu Gang, who would be better off dead than alive. Besides, all of this had happened because of a small incident. This was all because Wu Gang was a malicious person who accused other people of false crimes. 2 of his fellow disciples had been killed and he wasn't able to avenge them, so he had the evil idea to rape Yun Shi and use Ba Dao as a scapegoat, until Lin Feng appeared. In an instant, a group of extremely strong cultivators had been killed. 1 cultivator of the third Xian Qi layer, 2 of the second and 3 of the first. They were a monstrously strong force, but in an instant they all died. From that moment on, the Wuxia sect would no longer be considered as one of the powerful sections. And this all happened because they chose to make enemies of Lin Feng. Lin Feng looked at the ground covered with corpses. He was absolutely expressionless. It didn't affect him at all. He could still remember how cold and detached those people were when Yunxi tried to commit suicide. Lin Feng's heart was filled with coldness. Killing such scum didn't affect him at all. Lin Feng looked at Meng Qing, who was still holding Yunxi. He then looked at Mr. Hua and asked, "Mr. Hua, I want to save her. What pills do we need? Her blood vessels have been severely damaged. Apart from the divine waters pill, there is nothing that can save her," said Mr. Hua slowly, which made Mr. Qi frown. Were divine waters pills the only solution to save her? Lin Feng noticed that Mr. Qi was puzzled. He then asked again, "Mr. Hua, what kind of pills are the divine waters pills?" "Xian-level pills of high quality at least. They are divine pills." Divine pills? Lin Feng's heart started beating faster. These pills were at least Xian-level pills of higher quality. Lin Feng, even with the strength of his soul, was unable to concoct Xian-level pills of higher quality. Besides, she only had 7 days to live, which didn't give him enough time to concoct the pills to save her. It seemed like Yunxi was going to die in any case. "Is there no other solution?" asked Lin Feng while looking at that naive young girl. He couldn't bear seeing Yunxi die. Only if we could prevent her body from aging and the blood vessels from deteriorating, but in her current state, she will live 7 days at maximum. In 7 days, the blood vessels will weaken and she will die. I can't think of any other pill which would have a better chance at saving her than the divine waters pill, said Mr. Hua while shaking his head, which made Lin Feng remain silent. Wasn't there any solution to save her? "I have a solution," said a cold voice which surprised Lin Feng. It was Meng Qing. When she saw that Lin Feng looked troubled, Meng Qing lowered her head and said, "I can freeze her, which will slow the functions of her body, but she will not die." Huh. Mr. Hua was surprised. Meng Qing had that kind of ability. If you can do it, then let's give it a try. Then, if we manage to get the divine waters pill someday, we'll give it to her and save her. Meng Qing, said Lin Feng while looking at Meng Qing. He obviously understood what this would require. "Let's go back," said Meng Qing while carrying Yunxi. She turned around and walked towards Mr. Hua's house. Lin Feng and the others followed her. Only Ba Dao stayed there and picked up the na-rings and precious items from the corpses. After that, he followed the others. After they left, a crowd of people arrived at the battlefield. When they saw all the corpses, they were dumbstruck. They were dead. Every single person had died. All these corpses were strong cultivators of the Wuxia sect, and there were even extremely strong cultivators of the Xianqi layer. They were all on the ground, lifeless. "It's Lin Feng again. How terrifying," thought the people in the crowd while shivering. Lin Feng was a death god. It was better to stay as far away from him as possible. After that, the Wuxia sect would start to fall into decline. They had lost such a powerful and influential group of people. They had all perished in Celestial River. Lin Feng and the two others were outside a secret room in Mr. Hua's house. Meng Qing was inside that secret room with Yunxi. Lin Feng and the two others didn't know what the situation looked like inside. They waited for a while and then, the huge door of the secret room opened itself. Meng Qing's silhouette appeared at the door. She looked at Lin Feng and said, "It's all right now." After talking, Meng Qing immediately left and went to her own room. Lin Feng entered the secret room and slightly shivered because of the temperature. It was freezing inside the secret room. He only saw a bed and a frozen silhouette lying on it. It was precisely Yunxi. At that moment, she was frozen in ice. She completely entombed in ice. Lin Feng and the others couldn't feel any qi emerging from Yunxi's body. "There shouldn't be any problems," said Mr. Qi in a low voice. Lin Feng nodded and said, "I trust Meng Qing." Mr. Qi didn't say anything. Even though Meng Qing didn't say much, Mr. Qi could see that Meng Qing and Lin Feng's relationship was of an intimate nature. "All right, let's let her rest here in peace. Maybe when she wakes up, she will just have the feeling that she was in a dream," said Mr. Qi. Lin Feng slightly nodded. There was no other solution. At that moment, Lin Feng had no way to obtain Divine Waters pills. What he needed to do was to improve his cultivation level. "Let's go," said Lin Feng while leaving the secret room, whose door then slowly closed itself. Mr. Qi and Mr. Hua left, and then Lin Feng walked to Meng Qing's room and knocked. "I'm resting," said a cold and detached voice inside the room. She sounded like she was talking to a stranger, and was unwilling to let him enter. Lin Feng ignored her cold and detached voice, and immediately entered her room. Lin Feng entered the room and saw that Meng Qing's body was curled up on the bed. She was shaking from head to toe because her entire body was covered by a layer of frost. When Lin Feng saw that Meng Qing's body was covered by a layer of frost, he felt a pain invade his heart. "What are you doing?" said Meng Qing, sounding cold and detached. Lin Feng was looking at her. His eyes were filled with compassion. Lin Feng roughly pulled Meng Qing into his arms. He was firmly and tightly embracing her. He then said, "Meng Qing, why do you have to do this? You know perfectly well that you don't need to go through such pain." Obviously, Meng Qing was in that situation because she had frozen Yunxi's body. Now her body was in pain and freezing from the powerful ice qi. Meng Qing nibbled her lip. Even though Lin Feng's embrace was rough, each time he embraced her, her heart would still melt. "I don't like seeing you suffer," said Meng Qing to Lin Feng, which made his heart twitch. She just didn't want to see him suffer, nothing more. Because of that simple reason, Meng Qing preferred suffering in silence to protect Lin Feng. Lin Feng softly yet firmly embraced Meng Qing and said slowly, "Meng Qing, I am even less willing to see you suffer. You have to understand clearly that, for me, you are the most important person in my life. For me, you are the most important person in my life." When Meng Qing heard Lin Feng, her heart started pounding frantically. The incredible pain and her worrisome feelings seemed like they had completely vanished in an instant. She was the most important person for Lin Feng. For Lin Feng, nobody could replace Meng Qing. She had gone through so much with him. "Then why are you not kissing me?" said a Meng Qing with a voice which sounded like it was a dream. Lin Feng was stupefied. His face was filled with joy and delight. It was the first time that Meng Qing expressed her love for him. Lin Feng, who was still holding Meng Qing, gazed into her eyes and then moved to passionately kissing her. It wasn't a soft and gentle kiss. Rather, it was a wild and passionate kiss. It was filled with the passion of youth. When Meng Qing felt Lin Feng's lips, her heart started pounding. It seemed like the endless ice had melted thanks to one kiss. When Meng Qing felt Lin Feng's lips, her heart started pounding. It seemed like the endless ice had melted thanks to one kiss. She had never had such a feeling in her life. Felt so warm, so pure. She hoped that she would be able to stay by Lin Feng's side forever. That would bring her true happiness. Lin Feng's arms were still firmly wrapped around Meng Qing's body. He remained unwilling to let go of her. His heart was filled with an intense fire. His hands were moving across Meng Qing's perfect body. When Meng Qing sensed Lin Feng's hands, she slightly shivered. Immediately after, she stopped Lin Feng's hands from moving. Their lips separated. Lin Feng's hands were, as before, still on Meng Qing's body. They were soft and limpid as water. Besides, at that moment, Meng Qing's face wasn't filled with coldness anymore, but with a tender expression. Her face was pink. She looked so sweet. At the moment when Lin Feng wanted to react, Meng Qing said something. "Lin Feng, I want to hear a story." "A story?" A light flashed in Lin Feng's eyes. He looked at that sweet and delicate face. How could he refuse? "What kind of story do you want to hear?" asked Lin Feng while looking into her limpid eyes. "The fairy fox story," said Meng Qing in a low voice while putting her head on Lin Feng's shoulder. At that moment, she didn't look cold and detached at all. She was filled with softness. Lin Feng slightly nodded and his lips started moving as he started his narration. It was a beautiful moment, like a dream. Lin Feng's story continued for a while. When he finished telling the story, he left Meng Qing's room and closed the door. Immediately after, he disappeared from outside Meng Qing's room. "Lin Feng," whispered Meng Qing when she saw Lin Feng disappear. She then said, in a voice which sounded like it came from another world, "Lin Feng, at the moment, I am not good enough to be with you, but you should definitely wait for me." When Meng Qing finished talking, she leant against the window. There was only Lin Feng in her thoughts. Lin Feng's words were still resonating in her mind. "For me, you are the most important person in my life." Lin Feng could never blame Meng Qing for being so cold. These days her heart was finally started to melt. In her heart there was a thread of warmth. Meng Qing was Lin Feng's. She couldn't run away. Lin Feng would never allow her heart to break free. Lin Feng went to the room dedicated to concocting pills. Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi were there already. Mr. Hua, I want you to help me gather spiritual herbs and then start concocting pills, said Lin Feng, going straight to the point. Mr. Hua was surprised. He asked Lin Feng, what are we concocting and how many? Spiritual sanguine pills, pure earth pills, vitality pills and red sun pills. I need 30,000 of each, said Lin Feng solemnly, which made the two old men shiver. 30,000 of a single pill, what a gigantic amount. Spiritual sanguine pills are Ling-level pills of higher quality. The 3 others are medium quality. These 4 pills would be useless for cultivators of the Xian Qi layer. For cultivators under the 6th Ling Qi layer, the effects would be incredibly beneficial, especially the spiritual sanguine pills. If a cultivator under the 6th Ling Qi layer used the 4 pills together, I can guarantee that he would break through to the next Ling Qi layer. Besides, there would be no side effects at all from the instant breakthrough. Mr. Hua was looking at Lin Feng and said slowly, Lin Feng, if you gave 1 pill of each to 30,000 cultivators under the 6th Ling Qi layer, they would all break through to the next layer. You? Lin Feng nodded. Mr. Hua, of course, knew what Lin Feng intended to do. Mr. Hua, I have an army. I want to increase their strength. I want them to break through to a higher layer. Increase the strength of each member of an army, and increase your total strength. Even if Mr. Hua and Mr. Qi were much stronger than cultivators of the Ling Qi layer, if faced with 30,000 soldiers which all broke through to a higher Ling Qi layer at once, that would be terrifying. Besides, Lin Feng sounded extremely calm when talking about it. Concocting these 4 pills is not a problem. Besides, we can concoct them all at the same time. Even though there is a high success rate, 120,000 pills require a few days before we can refine them properly. Even with Mr. Hua's vast knowledge and abilities, he couldn't concoct Xian-level pills of lower quality with even 100% success rate. Always succeeding was improbable. Concocting Ling-level pills of higher quality wasn't hard for him though, and then he could concoct and refine an incredible amount of Ling-level pills of medium quality with a very high success rate. I can concoct at the same time as him, said Mr. Qi. Lin Feng smiled to the 2 old men and said, I'm not worried. Sorry for bothering you again. You can concoct at the same time. I would like to personally start the process though. Using the earth fusion, you two can give me direction. Pay attention. Mr. Qi and I will concoct the pills. When one of us takes a break, you can practice your skills. We'll guide you, said Mr. Hua. All right, said Lin Feng, obviously happy about the arrangement. He had 2 senior alchemists with him. He would probably be able to improve his concocting abilities extremely quickly. When they finished discussing all these things, they immediately started concocting pills with absolute determination. At the Wuxia sect, the setting sun was shining upon a palace in the mountains. It seemed like the entire beauty of the Wuxia sect resided there. It was absolutely magnificent. However, at that moment at the Wuxia sect, nobody felt like admiring the beautiful scenery. In a vast palace, the patriarch of the Wuxia sect, Gu Chunqiu, punched a table on his side which immediately broke into pieces. He was releasing an extremely cold qi. They had all died. The powerful cultivators of the Wuxia sect had gone to Celestial River and had all been killed. He had lost more than half of the strongest cultivators in the sect. That calamity made his sect become one of the weakest of the large sections. Maybe they would even walk on the same path as the Yunhai sect and end up being exterminated. The funniest part was that the calamity hadn't occurred while trying to steal the heavenly dragon cauldron. All of this had happened because they crossed paths with one person, Lin Feng. Wu Gang had offended Lin Feng, which was why Lin Feng killed all the outstanding elders and disciples of the Wuxia sect in Celestial River. There wasn't even one person left standing. Gather all the elders and core disciples of the sect, and send them all to Celestial River, said Gu Chunqiu coldly, which made other people shiver. Gathering all the elders and core disciples of the sect implied that there wouldn't be anyone left to protect the sect. What did Gu Chunqiu want to do? A sudden realization flashed in one of the elders' eyes. It seemed on the outside like Gu Chunqiu wanted to get his revenge, but in fact, There was another purpose: obtain the heavenly dragon cauldron. These days, many of the elders and disciples of the Wuxia sect had been killed by Lin Feng. The sect had almost become barren of talent. If they wanted to rise again, they needed to find something to aid them from outside the sect. The heavenly dragon cauldron was one of the aids they could get from outside. That was a good opportunity for them to regain their lost power. Therefore, Gu Chunqiu was sending these people. He obviously wanted to kill Lin Feng, but above all, he wanted the heavenly dragon cauldron. The setting sun was gradually going down while darkness gradually invaded the atmosphere over the Wuxia sect. At that moment, outside of the Wuxia sect, there was a cloud of dust. A group of dark silhouettes were rushing at full speed towards Celestial River. At the city gate of Celestial River, many people were waiting. When they saw the dark silhouettes in the distance come towards them, they were a bit surprised and all got prepared for a potential fight. Those days, everybody was coming to Celestial River because of the heavenly dragon cauldron. Besides, apart from extraordinarily strong and influential groups, nobody prevented anyone from trying to get the cauldron. Preventing people without backing from entering the city would at least reduce the number of people who were interested in the cauldron. There was more hope that way. Far in the distance, the dark silhouettes were approaching at full speed. Many people blocked the path and shouted, "Stop immediately!" However, nobody paid attention to them. The sky was pitch black, it looked cold, desolate and very sinister. There was a strange coldness invading people's hearts. It was silent. This crowd of black silhouettes were way too silent. There wasn't a single sound coming from their horses. People focused their eyes and fixedly stared at the people who were coming. Finally, the darkness gradually became clarity, but when the crowd saw these dark silhouettes, their hearts started beating faster. Coffins. That group of silhouettes were not riding horses, and instead it was a group of coffins moving in formation. How dreadful! "Stop!" shouted many people, but they only saw that each and every single coffin was calmly approaching them. It looked absolutely insane. Immediately after, the crowd was unable to move. In a flash they all disappeared. They had been taken inside the coffins. Ah! A blood-curdling scream spread through the atmosphere in the pitch-black night. Some silhouettes were moving out of the coffins. They had human shapes, but they looked like zombies. In a flash, the living cultivators had been devoured by the corpses. The hearts of the people in the distant crowd started pounding. They wanted to prevent these people from entering the city, but they remained in their original positions. They were not moving the slightest iota. Cold sweat was unceasingly flowing down their backs. How terrifying! These black coffins in a flash were inside the city. When the silhouettes disappeared from sight, the crowd sighed and took a deep breath. They all fell, seated on the ground, and took a long time to calm down. Who were those people? You're tuning into the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.